I don't know, they're out there in the winter.
Oh, you want?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But I brought coffee to a couple of them.
But then in the morning, 8 o'clock, I'm not early enough. Then I don't want to go somewhere that, now to get back. Yeah. I want to go somewhere, tomorrow morning I might decide to go to IKEA or something, or go somewhere else. And that's work. I work early enough. That's it.
Okay, being at 9 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Michelle, can you please read the sunshine law?
This is a regular meeting of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Peaport, Tuesday, September 6, 2022. Let the minutes show that adequate notice of this meeting as required by Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, has been provided by the annual notice, which has been posted on the bulletin boards, filed with the Borough Clerk, and has been sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Independent, the Star Ledger, and the Two River Times.
Thank you. Can we please have a roll call?
Mayor Kennedy.
Here.
Council President McNamara.
Here.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Here.
Councilmember McDermott.
Here.
Councilmember Davidson.
Here.
Councilmember Aranio.
Here.
And Councilmember Pepperoni.
Here.
Thank you.
For matter of record, if we can also just go on record that Mr. William Opal is here today for legal counsel in place of Leslie London, who is not here this evening. Everyone can please join me in saluting the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We need standing for a moment of silence of their choosing. Thank you. Just a quick point of order. There was communication circulating again that tonight was going to be the hearing for the ordinance for the pilot for Beckley Manor. So I just want to go on record in case anyone is here for that this evening. That is not being heard tonight. But I would like to take a moment to defer to Council President McNamara, who does have an update. In case you were here for that, you can at least receive the most recent update. And then if you don't wish to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're always welcome. But in case you don't want to, you'll at least have the update. Council President?
Thank you. And actually, my comments are not in reference to the pilot itself. They're really in reference to the rents and what's been going on and the notices that people have been getting. So I know some of you have spoken to me. Some of you have spoken to Perth Amboy Housing Authority, but I just want to give a little bit of background for everybody in the community. And I'm actually going to read right from something that I got from the Perth Amboy Housing Authority. So for a brief history, Capital Realty, who's the current owner, bought the development from the previous owner a year ago, July of 2021. The previous owner was a not-for-profit with a HUD 202 mortgage that requires the rents to be affordable. This owner kept the rents even lower than the HUD required and appeared to never raise the rents. In fact, most of the people that I've spoken to, their rents were not raised for 7 to 10 years. And the reason for the sale of the property was because the mortgage was paid off and the previous owner was no longer bound by any of the HUD requirements. So Capital Realty, the new owner, is a for-profit organization, and they specialize in subsidized properties. They applied to HUD for what are called tenant protection vouchers to assist the current tenants in keeping their rents affordable. So So under this program, tenant rents are calculated according to 30% of their adjusted annual income. So a lot of folks in Bethany Manor have had to submit a lot of paperwork that goes through their income, and usually the only other thing they can write off are their medical expenses. So bear in mind, for 7 to 10 years, folks' rents were kept artificially low. They were not being assessed and paying 30%, which is now what they're entitled under the new ownership. So we have been working closely with both Perth Amboy, HUD, and various attorneys to work through this. And one of the things I am actually happy to report is that the Bethany Manor owner, Capital Realty, did put notices under the doors of the current, I think it's 118 tenants who have already been qualified for the program, to say that those rent increases, which range anywhere from $200 to $1,000 on top of what they were currently paying, all of those rents are on hold until January 1st. So basically, 5 months worth of increases are not happening. There's more work and more conversation for us to do, and this is obviously all part of, what we're looking to reflect upon as we consider the extension with the pilot. And I will throw out there again, if anybody is getting notices, has any questions, please call me, reach out to me. If I can answer your question, great. If I can't, I'll steer you to the right people. But I think that this was a big, step for us, getting those increases in rent postponed for a total of 5 months right now. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work you've been doing on that. Is anyone going to request anything to be tabled or pulled on tonight's agenda before we open to the public? Councilman Davis?
Thank you, Mayor. I received notification late today that DPW supervisor would like to...
Speak up, I can't hear you.
Is that not any better? Oh, sorry about that. So received communication late today, the DPW supervisor would like to request that we pull 22-198, honoring the appointment of Andrew Rowe for DPW. You'd like to have further discussions on this. He's currently a part-time employee. We're looking to make him full-time, and being a DPW additional staff would be a good idea. But we will pull this to be discussed further, and then it'll be on the next agenda, hopefully.
Anything else needs to be requested to be tabled or pulled?
Fine, there are some couple of different communications with the
Okay. So if that's the pleasure of the governing body, I will say that I find that interesting because we keep making recommendations. This is not the first one this year that we've made a recommendation after consultation with the administrator and the supervisor for full-time employment, but then we keep hearing over and over again that we don't have enough employees. I know this is I think the 7th year in a row. We do not have the areas of the school prepped in time for the opening day of school this year, even though I put in this request and reminder weeks and weeks ago. So I find it odd that we wouldn't want to, we'd fall in the same trap we did back in the spring when we didn't hire someone full-time. But if that's the pleasure of the council, that's your prerogative. So is there a motion?
Motion.
The table?
Second.
All in favor, or I don't know, we have to do roll call, can you table?
Councilmember Pacheco.
I'm assuming there's a reason, so yes.
Councilmember McDermott.
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson.
I'm going to say no to table because I believe we should be hiring somebody at this point in time, so I'm going to say no. I know I just recommended all of them to be direct communication.
Councilmember McNamara.
No.
Councilmember Aranio.
No.
And Councilmember Pepperoni.
No.
So why did we...
The vote doesn't pass to pull.
Okay.
That's fine.
So next, is there anything else before we open it to the public that needs to go over? Okay. So can I have a motion to open the public for communication and consent agenda items only?
Motion.
All in favor? Thank you. Any members of the public have communication regarding, comments regarding consent agenda and communications only? Public hearing parts we'll have later. Mr. Shaw?
Okay, Strauss, 235 Main Street. Communication number 9 regarding the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Could that be separated and discussed separately from the other communications?
Actually, I have a follow-up to that real quick, actually. Hold on one second, Mr. Shaw. Jay, I had sent something late this afternoon. There was a legal interpretation that was sent out by Leslie. Did that go to the full governing body? Because if not, I don't feel that they should be able to vote on that.
I did not see that. I'm not sure how late it came, but I may have missed it.
So my email to you was, did it go? It came last week, but did it go to the full governing body?
I don't honestly recall.
Okay. So I'll defer. Did the full governing body receive the legal opinion on that matter? Okay. So I think I would suggest that that would also be tabled as well.
Okay, probably until the next meeting. So my request would just be that before it is voted on as, a communication along with that there be some discussion or explanation or definition of legal basis or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Mr. Lane?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Michael Lane, 51 First Street, Keyport. To build on what Mr. Strauss was mentioning, letter number 9, really would like to see the council take some action on this issue, get ahead of the ball. The applicant wants to post documentation in our borough park for more than a month. And it would seem to me that if you get permission to use the parks, it's generally for a day or 2 days, but not for a month. And I would think there's an opportunity to require for every day that a posting would be, or use of the borough park would occur, there has to be at least one resident of Keyport that requests it. So if it's going to be a 30-day or 60-day posting, there should be 60 Keyport residents that sign off on the posting. Seems like a simple move, because when we have the snapper contest, when we have the painting on the promenade, those are all wonderful activities that last for a day or two. And so, and they're actually promoted by recreation commission committees in town. And so to let anybody come in and post for 2 months in our parks, you need some protection. And a very simple protection would be that for every day of the posting, a different Keyport resident has to sign off. So if it's going to be 60 days, you got to come in with a petition from 60 residents of Keyport. On the resolution 2022-195, the bylaws for the bid, I scanned that, well done. I just reflect on the fact, and I ask council to reflect on the fact, you're requiring an organization in town to post their minutes, all their resolutions, etc. within 30 days. How many months has the council failed to do that? Really? Thank you.
Daniel Mestre, Bureau 378 Atlantic Street. I definitely would like to echo what Mr. Lane said.
regarding the minutes of the agenda. I think it's important that we have that transparency. Another thing that I noticed in the consent, the communications by consent, it looks like we might be approving this permit for number 7, and I just wanted to make the mayor and council aware that the name of the organization holding the car show, it is based on a racial slur and might cause harm to our Asian and Pacific Islander residents. And I would like, the borough to really think about what that message would reflect. Another issue is the porta-johns. I've heard that they're in very bad condition. I've seen them in bad condition. When are they changed? How often are we maintaining them? I'm just looking for an update.
You can ask that during public comment. Thank you. Any other members of the public? Mr. Straw?
Jack Straub, 235 Main Street. Just to follow up quickly, based on what Mr. Lane said and what I said earlier, since the Freedom from Religion has been tabled 2 weeks, if it hasn't already been discussed among members of the council, I would recommend going to their website. I understand there's legal ramifications and things like that, but their own website lists examples of Supreme Court rulings where municipalities have not had to be held to the things that their foundation pushes for. Their foundation clearly, on their website, states that they want to get rid of all displays, and in the event where they can't get rid of all of them, then they want to be a part of them. It appears that there are a number of other options that municipalities can take. One of them appears to be that if you had a Christmas tree, no nativity, no menorah, that there's no equal representation there because you're not making a religious statement. So my suggestion would just be that there are a number of different options that can maybe be taken other than just we have to do it because they're threatening a lawsuit or something like that. So I ask that council look into all those options. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Seeing no hands, can I have a motion closed to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor? For the mayor's report, I'll be brief on that tonight. I just want to express sincere thank you and gratitude to Council President McNamara and Recreation Committee member Suzanne Ryan, along with the Keep Our Recreation Committee, for their dedication and commitment to providing a successful mini camp day camps for the first time in our borough. So thank you for doing all that organizing and planning behind the scenes and making it come to fruition. I think it was well received by those that attended. I participated in a virtual town hall for Mayor's Wellness Campaign from all municipalities within Monmouth County that are part of the program or those seeking to be part of the program. I think it was beneficial. It was a small number that participated, so I think that was even better to have Keyport represented at the forefront. So also attended the Green Team meeting this month, attended 2 special meetings of KVDC regarding the bylaws, and attended the American Legion meeting, and they expressed, which I have relayed on, their appreciation for Keyport Police Department's assistance, as well as the borough assistance with the road closure for the snapper contest, which enables them to be able to provide the food to the participants at the snapper contest. So that's all I have for mayor's report. Consent agenda items or any discussion?
Yeah. I mean, is there a reason to not hire this particular, why were we tabling it? I guess.
So the DPW supervisor sent me an email late today requesting us to consider tabling it to the next meeting because he wanted to have further dialogue on it. He was apparently made aware a while ago that this was going to be happening. So there was that. He's currently a part-time employee. He's been with us. We want to make him full-time. So I wanted to bring it to the full governing body to say this is what was brought to me, which I think is fair. But I don't agree with it. I think we need to hire somebody full-time and have them in place instead of having a situation.
So it's the position, not the.
Okay. I
I
don't know what the supervisor is looking to discuss. So, I want to be fair and throw it out there as a full governing body decision, whether we table it or not. But I think in the light of how much work needs to be done in the borough, if we sit here and we table it, we're losing time, and I don't think we're in a season or a time frame where we have that luxury.
You just do your vote as it goes on. That's it. That's all. Okay.
Any other items or questions before I ask for a motion on this? Is there a motion to approve R 2022-193 through R 2022-198?
Motion.
Second.
Let's have a roll call, Michelle.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott.
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson.
Yes.
Councilmember McNamara.
Yes.
Councilmember Aranio.
Yes.
Councilmember Pepperoni.
Yes.
Okay, next we have the public hearing number 1, which is applicant 149 West Front Street LLC for a permit to replace the existing bulkhead at 149 West Front Street, block 21.02, lots 15-19. Before we open to the public hearing, I just want to take a moment to explain the background on all of this, as well as Jay to confirm for Bill. So I know there was some communication that transpired about when this job site was about to start moving forward with the bulkhead repair. Apparently they unilaterally thought I had the power to go shut that job site down, which I don't. It was expressed to them that they still had one more step to do, which was to come before mayor and council. I just want everyone to know I did not create that step. That ordinance has been on the books since 1943, and it's been codified since 1972. So this is not something that Mayor Kennedy was trying to block something from moving forward, and I just want to make that very clear. And also, the council can also confirm that we also had to have the same type of hearing back in May on another property within the municipality. So this is nothing new. This was nothing directed at anyone individually. Mr. Delaney, I believe it's also true that as much as we would like to remove this from being in the purview of the mayor and council to have to come through another step, which I don't believe any of us are engineers to even be qualified to make these decisions. We're basing it off our engineer who we do hire, who already has to review this anyway. It is my understanding that as much as I keep trying to clean up ordinances, this is one we're not allowed to, except for minute details, which is going to be heard at the next meeting, as far as incurring charges for to offset the expenses to the borough. But we are not allowed to remove this. We have to have this on the books. Is this correct?
Excuse me, the requirement is actually state law. It mandates that the municipality, the governing body shall review and approve these type of applications. So it is not a permissive statute, is my understanding in conversation with the Borough Attorney Leslie London, who's not here tonight, but that we are in the process of reviewing the ordinance for some, what I would call housekeeping, as well as to establish a fee because of the cost involved in doing the review. But this is a state requirement for this process.
Thank you for helping clarify that and to confirm reality. So I would need a motion to, oh no, I have to have the clerk read it by title. Okay. So can I have a motion to open to the public?
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we are ready. I'm so excited, Mr. Luttrell, to speak on behalf of this applicant, I'm assuming.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lawrence Luttrell. I'm the attorney for 149 West Front Street, LLC. And we are here on the application. Just briefly, this came as a shock to us that there was actually a local ordinance requiring the bulkhead approval, because we've gone through extensive amounts of approvals already. We've gone through the DEP, gotten a DEP permit, which we provided. We also submitted as a condition of that DEP permit a application to the Army Corps of Engineers, which after 45 days, if they have an objective, is a default approval, which we have. And we also submitted to the zoning office here for approval to replace the bulkhead. And on top of all of this, prior to the applications being submitted, my client, just a bit of history, bought this property from the owners of the Ye Cottage Inn. Anyone here with any memory, as far back as I could at least go, remembers the Ye Cottage Inn was here for eons, it felt like. What had happened, it actually had a Tidelands claim over about 70% of the property where the building sat. somehow they got away with having to deal with it, which you don't have to remove, the state can't force you to remove the property if you're in violation of the Thailand's grant, but you can't get any financing or do anything of that nature because it's a cloud on title. So once my client realized that prior to us closing, we escrowed money in order to deal with the Thailand's grant. What we found out in my research was that there is a Thailand's grant existing already for the existing parking lot, which is lots 18 and 19. And then the other lots, which are 15 through 17, where the building sat, which was encumbered by the Thailand's claim to the state, actually preceded the whole Thailand's Act in its entirety under what was the original thing called, and I'm sorry if I'm going to bore anybody in the audience, it's called the Wharf Act of 1851. And what had happened is, in order to encourage commerce in a very young new nation, the state of New Jersey gave waterfront property owners the right, part of the Wharf Act of 1851, to put up bulkheads and to encourage the creation of bulkheads in order for ships to be able to have passage and also to help waterfront areas be able to develop. That's what was done here. And so what we applied for with the Thailand grant was called a confirmatory grant, where they confirmed that we in fact received legal title to the property, at least for the installation of the bulkhead up to the mean high water line, and that's what we got back. So it took forever to get that, by the way. We closed over 5 years ago.
5 years.
And we just got the actual form of the grant from Thailand's in May, and we still haven't gotten the signed Thailand's grant from the borough of Thailand's. However, we're allowed to proceed forward because we own the property now. We at least got the Thailand's Bureau confirming that we do have the rights under the Wharf Act of 1851. So sorry to bore everyone with the history of it, but ultimately we felt we had complied with every other aspect of it, and then lo and behold, after we were ready to move forward on this project, we found out that we needed to get this approval. So I am respectfully here, apologetic for proceeding forward without seeking this board's approval for that. And we would respectfully ask for this board to rely on the information I provided here, as well as the information I provided in the application. That application that we submitted consisted of the following. It consisted of the actual DEP permit that was issued authorizing the reconstruction of the 333 feet of bulkhead that is there now, which is failing. It also included the application and explanation of the project and its replacement that was submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers. That was really the largest portion of the application. It also included the plans from Waterman, which was the engineer that my client had hired to apply for and obtain the Thailand's grant, the DEP bulkhead permit, as well as the design of the wall itself, the retaining wall. The materials have been sitting on site. Prior to that, the materials, my client had purchased them 2 years ago, and we're sitting in a warehouse or a yard, shipyard down in Virginia. So we are here now. We respectfully, there are some items I'm prepared to address on the letter. I'll defer to your engineer and any council members if they have questions. I do have the contractor here that is prepared to testify. I do have a summary. One of the things pointed out in that letter was a description of the materials to be used. I frankly can only read like a parrot here. If the board would prefer me to call up and have the actual testimony, I'm prepared to do that as well, so I'll defer to you now.
Defer to our engineer. Do you have further questions, or were your questions satisfied already?
I just have a couple of questions. I do have a letter dated August 31st, 2022. I do have the application to the Army Corps that was included with the application, however, it was undated. I'm not sure when that was actually submitted to the Army Corps. It was in the 45-day you get approval. I think this is more of a notice, but I just wasn't sure when that was submitted. So.
Sure. It was submitted quite some time ago. What I would ask, if I don't have that in front of me on the actual, that's actually the largest portion of what I have. I would ask if the board is inclined to proceed forward on this tonight, that we grant the condition that I have to provide proof that I was served upon the Army Corps of Engineers, which I'm more than happy to do.
That would be fine. And then secondly, you did provide some discussion about the Tidelands grant. Again, that wasn't included in the application, so you don't have the signed copy. But again, a condition from council, whatever information you do have from that, you can just provide that and we take a look at that.
I have a copy here, which I prepared to bring to you, which includes the draft version of the Thailand's grant. It's unsigned. I will represent that it came from Ralph Aston of the DEP. I can forward that email and copy you as well on that. I can only speak from my own experience, and I don't blame the Thailand's Bureau because they are understaffed and overworked, but they are very staffed.
I can attest to that. We've had applications that take 5 or 6 years to get just a response from Thailand.
Yeah, it's
Understand.
torturous. It's but it is what it is. I do have the information here, a materials list, a summary of it. I apologize for not being professional, but if you want me to testify to it, I just gotta speak about it.
Unless the council wants to hear the details, I can take a look at this after the fact and provide a response to that. And then just lastly, so this application is also tied to a planning board application, which I believe was received back in 2018 from the planning board.
There's an intertwine, and I'll give a brief history on that. So my client had also applied for site plan approval to develop the property approximately 2 years ago. That was held up for one of the reasons, the major reason was the Thailand's issue. We couldn't move forward with that application for that reason. I had submitted in July a request to the zoning, is it combined land use board here? The combined land use board to extend our approvals, which is permitted under not only the Permit Extension Act, but also under the statute as well, when you're waiting on outside agency approvals to move forward, which we were, so that we're seeking. One of the conditions on that approval was to install a walkway, which is a continuation of the bulkhead walkway that exists now on the municipality's bulkhead, and to continue that all the way along and allow for public use access. We're not going to put the walkway in as of yet, and certainly not the public use access, because the project's not even begun yet, and certainly we expect to be in front of the board in order to do that. So prior to us being able to put a shovel in the ground, we would have to comply with the conditions of that approval, and I would ask that that component be omitted from any conditions here, so as not to have any conflict between this approval and the approval of the land use board, the land use board.
The project that you're talking about is the Port 149
Yes.
restaurant? I
That's
thought that
correct.
received full planning board approval back in 2017 or 18 with contingent things such as the bulkhead repair and so forth.
It did.
Okay.
What happened is the approvals are good for 2 years,
Yeah, okay.
and then we couldn't put a shovel in.
So 2 years ago, you were just talking about the extension. You didn't come back with a whole new application,
No, back in July, I just came back with
an extension.
We did ask for a modified change in one of the uses in the July application, but it has nothing to do with the extension request, too. The primary purpose is the extension.
So I can just add to that, and again, this is kind of separated aside from the planning board application, but somewhat tied together, because as part of the planning board application, within 5 years of the certificate of occupancy of the restaurant/bar, they are required to construct that walkway and provide an easement to the borough. However, it's not required until after the restaurant and bar is constructed. So at this point, I think what we've heard is that you're looking to install the bulkhead and not the promenade, then come back, build a restaurant. Once the restaurant's opened, in accordance with your planning board approval, you'll have 5 years from that date to construct the walkway.
That's correct. Plus, it's just not appropriate to have the walkway at this point, because it's going to be a live construction site at some point, and certainly, it's not safe.
So I just wanted to make it clear that those are kind of two separate things, that it's bulkhead construction and the walkway construction. The walkway is not going to
Correct.
move forward until the restaurant is constructed.
That's correct.
But I will say that the bulkhead is being constructed to elevation 8.1, which is the top of the concrete promenade.
not the Fireman's Park Promenade, so it is being constructed so that at the time that the walkway is constructed, it will be at the same elevation as the concrete promenade, not the timber decking that's at the Fireman's Park.
That was by design, because obviously the future intention was to go ahead.
So with the bulkhead now, the detail shows either 15-foot stone or concrete sidewalk. Which of those is going to be constructed with the bulkhead at this point? Would that be the stone or the concrete sidewalk?
Right now, we're gonna grade it.
If he wants to come forward to state his name for the record.
Sure. This is, I'd like to introduce Michael Nasty, he's the principal of 149 West Front Street LLC, also the owner of Keeper Fishery LLC.
Our intention now is just to grade it for now, and if need be, put stone, but again, like Larry said, if we're gonna do work, we really don't want people going through there. But at this point, I was gonna grade it, to grade even with the bulkhead all the way to the bridge, you just grade it at an appropriate level, and then further down the road, we'd figure out what we're gonna do there. But the elevation, the height will be 33 inches than it is now to meet with,
You're proposing adding fill to get to the top of the bulkhead?
I have fill there, but at some point in time, we're gonna fill to get to that point. Because I'm assuming when you do the parking lot and you do the other section of your bulkhead, you're gonna have to fill the parking lot as well. So there's a lot that's gotta go on before we do that.
So just to follow comment with that, the railing, are you proposing installing the railing?
As of right now, there would be no reason to have a railing because it's gonna be way high, so you're not
So
gonna.
the railing would be with the concrete promenade?
Right, after we install the concrete, you need something to hold back.
Okay, so one thing I will just recommend, and so basically, if you're gonna be installing the bulkhead, it's gonna be 3 feet higher.
33 inches.
33 inches higher than the current elevation. You're gonna have fill that's gonna be substantially higher than the timber walkway next to what you're working on.
I'm not gonna fill it though at this point.
Okay, so you're gonna keep it 33 inches
Exactly.
low. Which I would recommend that we do that, because otherwise you're gonna have a transition.
I'm gonna make it even from where it is now, but it'll be the same height.
And then just obviously, if you're going to be doing the concrete walkway in the future, you will need to provide details at that point for the concrete promenade, the railing, any details that's associated with that will have to come to structure.
So that was one of the conditions, I believe, in the development permit for the zoning board. I don't mind having two, I just don't want to conflict with each other, so that would be my only concern.
Okay, those are the questions that we had in our letter, unless there's any other questions from council.
Jay, do you have any questions? Because I know you were reviewing this as well before we asked council.
I have no questions.
Any council members have any questions? Councilmember McNamara?
I just have a quick question. It sounds like there was already a lot of thought about the borough's plan for our portion. Trevor, are you comfortable with everything they're proposing and how it would meet with what we plan to do in the future?
Yeah, so obviously they'll have to be tied together at some point, but I think those details can be worked out when they're ready to build the promenade. Right now, it will just be the bulkhead, and then we'll have to work together in the future.
Okay, thanks.
But the good thing is that the elevation will be the same, so we'll be able to tie into it at the point.
That was my question. I was trying to figure it out. Thank you.
Councilmember McDermott?
I just have a question, public safety. Given that you guys are not going to do a railing, or there still has to be some sort of public safety so that no one walks there. So what is going to do to prevent someone from walking?
So right now, the area is fenced, that's part of the requirements because it is vacant, so that fence would continue to stay there as a barrier to ward off anyone from straying on, kids or something flowing onto the property. My client's there every day as well, the fishery, so they're constantly
So you
keeping an
continue
eye
the
on it.
fencing and the no walking?
Correct. Yes, we're concerned obviously too about the liability aspects of it because it is uneven and it's not graded. And ultimately that's, we're worried about that
I
aspect.
guess my only other concern is, I know that you're not going to do the filling till you get the CO and all that. I guess my question is, what's the timeliness on implementing that once you get the building up? Like, are you looking to do that in 2 years, or are you looking at, like...
They have within 5 years, Trevor said.
Yeah, no, I know, as the timeline says 5 years, to me that's a long time to like close that and cap that out and make it safe.
Yeah, so the answer, that's a great question, and it depends on a lot of things. One of them is the cost of materials to actually build, which are through the roof right now. If my client didn't buy this material now for the bulkhead 2 years ago, the cost of it would be almost triple. It's cost prohibitive to develop anything. So our plans, and that's one of the reasons why we're coming back before the land use board to tweak the actual site plan approval. If we get that tweak in the site plan approval, we'll be ready to move forward shortly after that, I'd say within 6 months. If we don't get it, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
So in other words, there's not really a definitive answer until the project's done, and then you see what the scope of work is at that point in time, which
I wish I could give a more concise answer, but that's exactly it.
but they're aware that they have the 5 years within the resolution.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Mr. Luttrell? Were there any questions from the Harbor Commission on that application?
No, my only question was about the evenness of the height, which was answered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I respectfully ask that you return to the application. Thank you.
Any other members of the public on this matter? The topic?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to congratulate the owners for being able to move forward at this point. It's going to look really great. And I'm glad that the elevation, it makes sense, and I'm glad that they're elevating it to the same height as the current improved promenade. So my main concern, and by the way, with respect to Mr. Luttrell, who I know and I admire, a waterfront borough it's not punitive to have this kind of ordinance in a waterfront borough. We need this, and it's helped us a number of times when for council to be able to approve it. Just as a matter of course, but in this case, it actually affects how the council and how the borough will move forward with what is going to be the broken tooth in between the existing improved borough promenade and the promenade that thankfully they're going to be improving. So my main concern is, Trevor, is there a need for a return? We've talked about that, and we've heard that talked about a number of times. Is there a need for a return or a temporary return that either the borough needs to build or the applicant needs to build to prevent erosion behind the new bulkhead or anything like that?
So since they're keeping the elevation at the lower grade, I don't see the need for a return. At some point, obviously it's going to be one continuous bulkhead from start to finish. For the grade elevation, I don't believe there's a return necessary.
As the water makes its way into during moon tides and everything, is it going to cause any kind of back erosion? So if I'm to understand this, they're going to build the wall of the bulkhead. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but they're not going to backfill behind it. It's going to be the sheeting and the well-built bulkhead in front of it, right? And then you're not there. It's not. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to address you, but it's not. You're not going to backfill it until a certain time when it's determined that they need to be backfilled, right?
Correct. Yeah, you're going to see the sheeting for approximately 30 inches on the landward side of the bulkhead.
Right. Just like when they improved bulkhead, that was like that for a little while until they backfilled it and raised it. Is there any kind of issue that we might experience with not damage but increased risk when it comes to the moon tide or flooding without having a kind of return installed there?
No, it'll be, if you look at the current concrete promenade versus the timber promenade, which is really just a continuation of that, where you have basically butt up against each other, and the same situation on this side, just the opposite.
That sounds good, but in my layman's observations, the moon tide isn't affecting that part of the promenade. It's only affecting exactly where this is going to go and where the borough's existing bulkhead is too low to deal with that.
I think the moon tide actually usually comes up through the inlets first.
Okay.
And because the inlets are lower than the bulkhead, so in this instance,
That's a good point.
if
So
it
it's gonna
gets
seep
that
back out
high,
through
the
the
whole
inlets.
parking lot's gonna be underwater by the time it floods on top of the bulkhead.
I trust the judgment of the engineer on this. I was hoping that there would be some kind of return, but based on what what they're describing as the interim construction, I trust the engineers and the builders and the landowners on this. One last question. The amount of time between when it's going to be backfilled, I heard two different numbers. Was it 5 years, or was it 3 years, or 2 years, or not indeterminate?
So the promenade has to be constructed 5 years from the CO of the restaurant/bar. Within 5 years, not.
But they're gonna have to backfill it and raise it up before then, right? To shore up the bulkhead and whatnot? Or,
So right now, it sounds like they're gonna keep it 33 inches low, and then when they build the promenade, they'll build it up to that elevation, to the final bulkhead elevation, and build a concrete walkway.
so they're gonna backfill it after they do the construction of the building? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So the building's gonna be on piles, so the building's gonna be elevated above the ground, and this will be coming in after that. And at that point, depending on where the borough is, could be at least 5 years from today, probably, obviously more than that. Depends on where our property is, our bulkhead is, it could be raised at that point, the parking lot could be raised, so it's gonna be dependent on what the borough side of that elevation is. If it's there today, you're gonna need a walkway or a ramp from our parking lot, our promenade, up to the proposed
Like you
walkway.
have at the current promenade, but so now what I'm hearing is that it makes more sense for them to wait for the borough to act to shore up and raise the broken tooth part of the bulkhead, for them to do the backfilling and shoring up that they need to do.
It could be really either way. It's just going to be whoever goes first is going to need that ramp and steps down or up to whatever the elevation is.
We received, obviously, I don't know if we received it yet, but we're getting almost $500,000 to do that construction of the Fireman's Park bulkhead. Is there any update as to, has there been any movement towards replacing that bulkhead?
We actually applied for another grant to go towards that project as well. Unfortunately, we were denied for that. So hopefully, if we had that money, we'd probably be moving it a lot further, but I think we're still trying to figure out the rest of the funding sources for it. Is that correct, Jay?
That's correct. And while the funding that you're referring to is $450,000 federal appropriation, we are in the process of what I'll call final securing of those funds. It was, while it is a direct appropriation, it is subject to an application process that has been initiated that is currently in review by FEMA, because it is the funding at the federal level is being funneled through a FEMA mechanism. So we expect to have some answer on that as far as the final security by the end of the year.
Seems to me the time is of the essence. Is there any effort now? Obviously, the borough has to go through the same approval process that the applicant did. Is that true or no? With the DP and all of the other organizations, the Army Corps of Engineers, is that true? Do we have to apply for the same types of approvals?
We do. I don't believe that we will encounter the same tideline issues that they may have encountered, which seem to be a significant part of their delay. But we will have to go through both the DEP and Army Corps application process.
In the budget this year, is there any appropriated funds to start that along, or even better, start the construction? Is there any capital appropriation?
Our capital budget anticipates this project. Again, it does, I'm trying to recall, I believe at the time the budget was adopted, we may not have received final word that the federal appropriation was in place. My recollection was that they were pretty much simultaneous. I believe that the federal bill that included the appropriation was signed by the president in late March or early April. But in any event, we've anticipated this project as being a priority, but we have not secured either the federal funding in the form of the check is in the mail, nor have we put in place the supplemental funding that we anticipate for the full project cost.
And how soon do you think that the borough will be able to start the process of at least maybe getting the approval? So when we're ready to fund the project, we have the approvals in place? Or is that something that we can do?
I think it's prudent to review the file, because if everyone that was around during that time, 10 years ago, when the wooden bulkhead that had just been replaced was damaged and uplifted from Sandy, we actually applied to have the recovery funds replace the bulkhead to match the existing concrete, and that we would just pay the difference. So when FEMA was agreeing to pay for the damage that we put in for reimbursement for after the storm, we asked at that time, in my understanding, I wasn't on the governing body then, but my understanding was that they asked at that time to raise it higher so we wouldn't just keep replacing the wooden bulkhead. And they were, so my point is that application, I think, already exists, so I don't think it's going to be as heavy of a lift, because the documentation should be able to just be updated and to a modern date.
Do you or the administrator think it's prudent to look into that and maybe start that along so we can play a little bit of catch up with the applicant that's actually going to start doing that?
Our current timeframe, as I said, is we expect to have the final okay from FEMA as far as the expenditure of the initial funds that we've secured. Once that happens, I think that at that point is the time when we'll initiate the funding in place to proceed with the preliminary permits and those things. I would also mention that, as I said earlier, this is a priority in terms of on a number of levels. We've identified a number of potential funding sources for a number of, usually related to either FEMA hazard mitigation or resiliency for climate change. So we've explored several opportunities for additional funding for this project.
Wonderful. Have you looked into the USDA as well? Is that something that might be able to help?
We have not identified. I don't recall that USDA was one of the sources. Most of the resiliency funds are coming through FEMA at this point at the federal level.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And I should point out, though, that this funding is coming through FEMA, which was the same organization that didn't approve us 9 years ago to lift it, and said we would pay the difference, and they said they would only replace like kind. So the irony of the full circle of all this is very interesting. Any other members of the public? Mr. Lane?
Michael Lane, 51 First Street, Newport. I've had some experience with bulkheading, and I shared that with Mike. Matter of fact, what's interesting is the sheathing and the piles are exactly the same as were used on the First Street bulkheads. And the design parameters are very similar. Couple things to be aware of. This ordinance, which requires the council to review, is really one of the most important ordinances in town relative to waterfront properties. And I'm going to share some information with you that will help you understand why it's so important. First of all, do members of the council have the design information for the bulkhead? It's my perception. You have the design it. Okay. Now, a couple things to be aware of is the Army Corps of Engineers approved this design based on this information. And the Army Corps of Engineers looks at a bulkhead design from a structural point of view. Will it withstand a BE zone storm? And this property is in a BE16 zone. And so the bulkhead has to be designed to that level. Now, the plans for this bulkhead are basically the same plans as the Keyport Yacht Club and as the First Street bulkheads, except instead of having anchor piles and drag logs, the bulkhead's going to be retained by steel rods with, I guess, sort of umbrellas like at the end. But the Army Corps approved this based on this drawing. And what does this drawing show? It shows a level of the ground at the top of the bulkhead. It shows a 15-foot wide stone or concrete, and my understanding is it's got to be concrete protecting the back of the bulkhead. And you say, well, why is that? Well, when the promenade bulkhead was designed by Birdsall Engineering, the first design, they were going to have a lip of about 3 feet above the concrete promenade. And all the work I had done said that's not going to work. So I went to the Army Corps of Engineers, and they flatly rejected that design. I have all those records. The Army Corps of Engineers requires fill to the top of the bulkhead. And we were rigorously tested on that for the First Street bulkheads. And so this drawing is what was approved by the Army Corps of Engineers. Secondly, NJDEP permitting. The big issue with NJDP is where is the bulkhead going to be relative to the mean high water line? And we literally had NJDEP inspectors coming out to the First Street bulkheads once a week to make sure we weren't on the wrong side of the mean high water line. This applicant, because he's in the creek, he has to pull out the old bulkhead and put the new bulkhead in the same location. He can't go forward, he can't go further into the water. And so that's what NJDEP looked at and approved, the location. Now I've got a handout to share with you.
Mr. Lane, before you go forward, because Mr. Opal's going to need to review these to mark them in, since this is a hearing.
Oh, no, skip the first one. We're going to get them all out. Yeah, but one at a time. All right. The first package I would like you to look at is this labeled existing condition. And there's an aerial view of the property as it now exists, which shows that there's built and added, there's a silt fence around it.
I'm sorry, which one are we looking? I just got them all. Which one are we looking at?
This one.
Labeled
Thank you.
existing condition.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
It has the address up on top.
Got
It's
it.
the aerial view on the cover of it.
Awesome, thank you.
Hold on 1 second before you go on, Mr. Lane. Do we have to mark these, or? How do we, they're just commentary from Mr. Lee. Does that count as an exhibit for a hearing? Not a plan for it. Okay, continue, Mr. Lee.
The aerial view of the property as it is now, fill has been added, there's a silt fence around it, but there's still major sections of the property that are around a 4-foot elevation. And the bulkhead is around a 4-foot elevation. And there's multiple drawings that Trevor has put together that show that. I didn't bring them in. So we're not repairing the bulkhead, we're building a new structure. And this new structure is going to be, round numbers, 4 foot higher than the present bulkhead. It's going to be the top of the structure is going to be an elevation of 8.1 feet. The drawing that was approved by the Corps of Engineers shows that there's going to be fill behind the bulkhead. And the fill up to the top of the bulkhead and fill sufficient to support a concrete walls, I'm sorry, they're actually called splash pads. And share with you, there was a bulkhead, and when we came in before this council, Don Norbert was the engineer, we got quizzed extensively on where did we get our design, what is it, and we used the Yacht Club design, which had a solid fill behind the bulkhead. It had pavement behind the bulkhead. There was a bulkhead put in Union Beach. And I was able to explain, we're not using that design because there was no splash pad behind the bulkhead, and Sandy wiped it out. And it was only like a year and a half old. And so one of the really important things is the splash pad and the elevation of the ground behind the bulkhead to the level of the top of the bulkhead. Because you don't want the water waves coming over it and then flowing back with all tremendous force and pushing the bulkhead over. And that's why they're required to have fill to the top of the bulkhead. And that's in your flood damage prevention ordinance, right, Trevor? And so you're at extreme risk thinking you're going to go 5 years with no fill behind this bulkhead. The other thing is the bulkhead, and Mr. Fotopoulos started bringing up, the bulkhead has endpoints. When we came before this council for the First Street bulkhead, one of the most important things that we had to document was one end of our bulkhead was Anne Marie's property, and the other end of the bulkhead was 65 First Street. And how does the bulkhead at those endpoints interface so that those properties don't get damaged in a storm? And we'll go through that in a little bit. But so this property is going to have a lot of fill put on it. And one of the issues is, and I think a lot of you have been to Anne Marie Reedy's property, how do you keep that fill from getting washed away? And the First Street bulkheads are 3 feet lower, and the ground is 3 feet lower than the bulkhead at Anne Marie Reedy's property. And so, if you, and I think a lot of you have visited her property recently, there's a return that's along the side of the property to keep it from getting undermined in a storm. Also, if you go to Beach Park, you'll see returns on both sides of the bulkhead at Beach Park. The bulkhead at Beach Park on the east side has a return that goes all the way up to the paved parking area. And that return is put in place so that when the storms come in, and they come in and from the northeast and north, it doesn't undercut and dig out all the filth that was put in behind the bulkhead. So that's what a return is, and that's why it's really important. And so the borough lot 20 is going to be 4 feet lower than the fill behind this bulkhead, as approved by the Army Corps of Engineers. And so what's going to keep that material from being washed away. And that's why you have to require a return. The design documentation is incomplete. It doesn't define the returns. Now, what about the other end of this bulkhead? And I applaud the effort to get a bulkhead, but we got to do a good job on that bulkhead. At the other end of the bulkhead is what? The bridge over the creek. Have you been down and taken a look at it? How's this higher bulkhead, 4 feet higher, going to interface with the bridge over the creek? And if you look at this exhibit, this is the existing condition at the bridge. There's a steel sheathing bulkhead. The shape of the sheathing looks exactly like the shape of the vinyl sheathing that's been purchased for the Port 149. But what's the elevation of that sheathing? And how is the new bulkhead going to interface with the pier? I'm sorry, with the bridge. And that's something that when we did our bulkheads on First Street, we had to go into extensive detail with the inspectors on how we did that. And it had to be in our drawings. The other thing is that, in the second page, is that you're going to pull out this bulkhead. The wooden bulkhead is going to be removed. But what do you have right down there next to the bridge? You've got two very large forced mains carrying the sewage from Cliffwood Beach and other parts of Keyport right at that bulkhead. So where's the return going to be? Is the return going to be before the bridge? Are you going to replace the sections of the bulkhead at the bridge? That's not defined. There's no drawing to show that. And that's why this council has to deal with the local issues. The Army Corps doesn't deal with the local issues, DEP doesn't Corps. But that's why you're required to have this hearing. So you understand how this is going to work. And I would think we really want to protect the BRSA force mains. And so that needs to be thoroughly understood. There's two pictures of the force mains. You can see the wooden bulkhead. The height of the wooden bulkhead, I don't think it's much above 4 feet. I mean, much above, there's going to have to be 3 or 4 feet of additional bulkhead on top of it, but the drawings don't show that. So the bulkhead return has to be defined at both ends, and it's missing, not defined. Now, in addition, you go to this picture of a bulkhead. And you basically have the same design as the First Street bulkheads. I shared the drawings. The piles are going to be on 6-foot centers. There's going to be tie rods at each pile. There's going to be whalers. It's not clear the size of the whalers from the drawings. It's not clear how the whalers are. The whalers are at most 15, 20 feet, but you can have 300 feet of bulkhead. How do the whalers get connected to each other? None of that's defined in any drawing. Secondly, the site plan. There was approval for the restaurant, a site plan, but that site plan is totally invalid with this new bulkhead. It talks about repair, not replacement. The grading information is not accurate at all. It doesn't reflect the new elevation of the bulkhead. So you need a site plan covering the grading on lot 15 through 19, which and the site plan needs to clearly delineate where the returns are going to be, the design of the return, how high the returns are going to be. The return will start at the bulkhead at 4 feet, and it will gradually taper down because the ground level goes up. So it reaches West Front Street, where it'll be inches instead of feet. But there's no site plan, no delineation of the grading, no delineation of the bulkhead return, no design of the bulkhead return. Anne Marie Reedy's bulkhead is actually, the foundation is 4 feet into the ground. It's designed with block filled with concrete to reinforce the block and with tie rods in the blocks. So it's a really well-designed bulkhead to withstand. And let me tell you, we had some really significant wave action in Sandy in the V zones on the waterfront. The borough flood damage prevention ordinance, which the council just recently approved, requires that this bulkhead be certified by a registered engineer. And I assume that he's going to certify the bulkhead that's in the drawings that were given to the Army Corps of Engineers and JDEP. But you need to get that. That needs to be in place before any permits. And then you need, and Trevor is the new floodplain manager, we're going to need floodplain development permit, right, Trevor?
Yes, I do need a floodplain development permit. I did submit a letter dated August 31st, 2022, with that information.
And so I assume the floodplain development permit is going to be relative to the design that was submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers.
It's relative to the application that was submitted as part of this more secure application.
So, now, why be sensitive to this? This picture of some First Street properties where there was a concrete bulkhead that was probably 3 or 4 feet in diameter, across 3 or 4 feet in cross section, reinforced with concrete or with steel rods, but it collapsed. It fell over. The problem it had, there was no splash pad behind it. And so the ground behind the bulkhead got completely eaten away by the storm. And so all the energy of the storm turned this bulkhead right over on this side. And the properties behind the bulkhead, you can see the amount of erosion that occurred. There was probably 10, 15 feet of fill completely wiped out. And the storm caused some sand, but the neighbors on both sides suffered significant damage because this bulkhead failed. And there were no returns on this bulkhead. And there was no splash pad on this bulkhead. And so this is what you have before you tonight is a really serious consideration. And I ask you not to approve this design until you have a complete set of drawings showing the site plan, showing the returns designs, and you have a clear understanding that there's going to be fill put in right away when the bulkhead is put in, and a splash pad put in at the same time. Thank you.
May I address them?
Can I just, give me one second, Mr. Witcher? Jay and Mr. Opal, I just have a point of clarification. Thank you, Mr. Lynn. In regards to this application that went to DEP and Army Corps of Engineers, as they said years ago, we would then still hold them to the floodplain ordinance that was just voted on last month when this application has been in the process prior to the floodplain ordinance? Or wouldn't this be grandfathered in because it was an active review?
I'll let Trevor respond. It is my understanding that the borough engineers review pursuant to the flood damage protection ordinance and the special flood hazard area permit that's required under that ordinance was done in accordance with our current recently adopted ordinance.
That is correct.
So they have to fulfill the new step or they don't?
They have not been issued a flood permit, which is required, but the review was done as part of this review. There were 2 review letters that were included in the, from the engineer, from the borough's engineer to the council. One is, they're both dated the same, August 31. One references specifically the SFHA, which is the Special Flood Hazard Area Permit requirement. And there are a couple of technical conditions that the borough engineer has requested be included as part of any approval, but that is separate from tonight's review, because there is no requirement for a hearing on that. That is a matter of the application being submitted. But because of the fact that this is the subject of an application that is subject to those requirements, the borough engineer did those 2 reviews but provided separate letters, review letters regarding those.
I guess that's what I'm asking though. Why are they subject to that if we just voted on that last month, I believe, or possibly July? If this application was already in process?
Well, because there was no application submitted to the borough under the ordinance that was in effect previously. Our ordinance that we adopted took effect July 1, and while it changed some of the substantial technical requirements based on the borough engineer's review, they have complied and met those technical requirements, with the exception of providing the signed ACOE, that's the Army Corps of Engineer approval, as well as a signed Tidelands grant.
I just want to also point out, as Mr. Lee indicated, the site is in a VE15 to VE17 zone, flood zone. The new flood damage prevention ordinance is required to go 3 feet above that. So this bulkhead is not preventing any water in a 100-year storm event from hitting the land. No matter, unless this bulkhead is built up to elevation 17, the FEMA flood maps are saying that in a 100-year storm event, the water is coming over this bulkhead. So building this at elevation 8 or 9 or 10 is not going to prevent the 100-year flood storm from overtopping the bulkhead.
And that's true on First Street.
Hold on one second, please. So, the zoning application was filed prior to July, and the zoning application approval, it was noted in the zoning application, which was the 3rd piece of communication to the applicant, that this was required. It was referenced in that approval that, so how is that not a contingent application prior to July 1?
Well, it is my opinion, I'll defer to the attorney and the engineer, but it's typically the guiding document and guiding regulation is based on the application at the time of submission. That application for zoning was only for the zoning approval. The application to Army Corps of Engineers is only the Army Corps application. The application that came to us and is the subject of the hearing tonight is under our wharf and pier ordinance. But at the same time, anticipating that the question about the newly adopted flood damage prevention ordinance would come up, that review has been done. But technically, no application has been submitted under our ordinance.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Mayor,
Trevor,
Mayor?
hold on one second, Mr. Lee. Trevor, in regards to the returns that keep coming up, are you satisfied with this project not having returns?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to do it. You can build a return, or you can have a connection detail from the vinyl sheeting to the wood sheeting, which in our letter we did request a detail for that, and did submit additional information. I have not obviously looked at it yet, so you can take a look at that and see if we need additional information to satisfy the request.
So Trevor, are you saying you don't need a return to protect all the fill that's going to be behind this bulkhead?
I believe that can be done with a connection between the timber bulkhead and the vinyl connection.
I'm sorry, the timber bulkhead is the burrow bulkhead?
Correct.
And the vinyl bulkhead is 4 feet above that, and you can have all this fill behind it? And what's going to keep that fill from washing away?
So the fill at this point is not going to the top of the bulkhead as they indicated previously. They're going to keep it at the existing elevation until they build a ground up.
So then I'm going to go back to Army Corps of Engineers and get it shut down. Because the approval for the bulkhead is for, in the drawing, it's very clear. What does this drawing say? It says fill to the level of the bulkhead. And that was a very big issue on the first two bulkheads. So where do you get the basis for assuming that you can go 5 years without bringing the fill to the top of the bulkhead?
So, I mean, that is something that I can ask the Army Corps if they can, you know, if that's something that would not be required right away, or I can definitely reach out to the Army Corps and make that a condition of approval if we would like to do that, and get an answer from the Army Corps.
And for 5 years?
Correct.
As I say, from experience, the first three bulkheads, they have stood up well since they were built. The yacht club bulkhead has stood up really well. The bulkheads that did not have fill to the top of the bulkheads have been a disaster.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Mr. Luttrell?
Thank you. Just briefly, I wanted to address several things. One, so aside from photographs that this gentleman has produced tonight, there's been no actual studies or anything done. I would ask the board to take into consideration that you have your own engineer's expertise, as well as the expertise of our engineer that submitted it, as well as the oversight of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection that approved this design and this bulkhead under Coastal Zone Management General Permit number 10, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, who has not voiced an objection to it. If the gentleman feels necessary to notify the Army Corps of Engineers that he has an objection, by all means, he's certainly free to do that. We'll address any concerns that they may have at that point. It shouldn't hold up any note here. I will also note that the DEP permit provided notification, there's publication on the DEP when they grant approvals. And this particular permit was approved back in September 27, 2021. Any aggrieved person, it sounded like the gentleman had some reservations about this permit, could have filed an objection with DEP within 30 days of that September 27, 2021 date. He has not done so. And so ultimately what I would ask this board to consider is that the Coastal Zone Management General Permit number 10 that is produced and before the board and approved by the Department of Environmental Protection, specific, that permit is to replace the existing bulkhead. No further waterward, no further inward, exactly where it is. The benefit we have is we're going up higher than what the current bulkhead has now, obviously because at some point we're going to be filling in higher at that point in order to match the promenade or the walkway, obviously the fill in that's going to go in before that point. We very well could have just not developed the bulkhead, not developed the property, and let the water take it back. Obviously that's not something any prudent property owner is going to want to do with waterfront property, but nonetheless, that could be a possibility. The second thing is a thing called the Zane exemption. I'll let the borough attorney or the engineer explain it in further detail, but the Zane exemption was an exemption where you didn't need a permit approval. If you had a lawfully existing bulkhead, you were allowed to replace that lawfully existing bulkhead exactly to where it was. So my client actually had the ability to forego the DEP approvals and replace the existing bulkhead at the existing height that it is right now. He chose not to do that. Why? Because he knows he has this approvals pending with the land use board, where at some point he's going to go beyond the scope of what he's allowed to do, which is replace the existing bulkhead to where it is, and go up even higher and allow it to match the township's promenade. So I ask the council to take that into consideration here in granting its approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Seeing no hands, council motion to close to the public?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Do you have any further commentary for council to consider?
Mayor, I just, the question that was raised regarding the splash pad, or as well as tied to that is the plans that were approved by Army Corps do clearly indicate that there will be a backfill up to the proposed top of the bulkhead. I'm curious, we heard initially that the applicant was not intending to provide that fill or the walkway until a point in the future. Notwithstanding the fact that such a fill would then require the addition of a railing or some other structure. Is there any way to, or is the applicant prepared to provide the fill to address the concerns that have been expressed?
Have a motion to go back up to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
State unequivocally that the applicant's prepared to construct the bulkhead exactly the way it was approved by both the Army Corps of Engineers, our engineer's design, and the DEP permit. If it's not in compliance, someone can certainly, as this project was stopped in mid-construction, do the same thing again and bring it into compliance if that's the case.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Have a motion to close back to the public. Mayor? Oh.
Have some scotch.
I think I heard the applicant say, and I hope I didn't mishear it, he's going to construct it as approved by the Army Corps of Engineers.
That is what the attorney just said.
And so as in improvement, any building as approved by the Army Corps of Engineers is fantastic. That will solve any issues with relative to the structure. But you still have to deal with the endpoints. And you still have to deal with how we're going to deal with the pipes from the Bayshore Regional Sewage Authority. Where is the return going to be? And how are we going to deal with the Lot 20 interface?
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Have a motion to close to the public?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Trevor, there's 2 points that were just brought up and also mentioned before. Do you want to advise the council of your opinions on those?
Sure, yeah. So we did have in our letter a detail for the connection of the proposed vinyl bulkhead to the borough's timber bulkhead and a detail for ramping of the elevated stone and concrete sidewalk to the existing H&A walkway in the borough's property. So now they're going to construct it to that elevation. That's something that we'll have to take a look at. And again, they did supply additional information. I'll take a look at that and I'll make sure that we are satisfied with whatever detail that may be before we allow them to start construction.
So, can you just give a review of what your contingencies would be for suggestion of approval tonight?
Sure. So, the first thing would be provide the date for the Army Corps of Engineers submission for the nationwide permit. I think this number. Three. So Army Corps Nationwide General Permit number 3, when that was submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure that it was within the time frame. The submission of the Tidelands grant information, which was provided tonight. the provision of the details that were mentioned in item 3 in our letter dated August 31st, 2022, which included the detail for connection of the proposed vinyl bulkhead to the borough's timber bulkhead. We can also include in there the connection to the bridge. That was not in my letter, but I will include that as part of our review, and a detail for ramping of the elevated stone or concrete sidewalk to the existing HMA walkway on the borough's property, should same be constructed at elevation 8.1 per the submitted plan. Let me just double check if there's anything else. And those would be the conditions there.
Items that you received from the applicant tonight, how much time do you believe that you need to take to review that? A 30-day review, a 3-day review, an hour review?
Say by the end of the week I will get a response back to the applicant.
Thank you.
So I hope you guys are taking very good notes, because you're going to need to repeat all of that in your motion. If that's the pleasure of the governing body. If you don't have questions prior.
I have a question, and I think it's just because maybe I'm just not familiar with it. So what's the difference between a return and what you're proposing?
So a return would be similar to this desk that I'm sitting at. You'd have a bulkhead and then a return to a particular position. So that would be in the case if you don't have a bulkhead over here, I think you need a return to prevent the sand or gravel from migrating this way. In this case, you have another bulkhead that's here, so you're going to be connecting this to that bulkhead in a straight line. So Mr. Lane's example of this is the return.
Thank you.
Any other further dialogue amongst the council members?
So regarding because there are pictures about the pipeline, so based on the plan, they're basically going to keep the pipes as they are, but, stand above and.
Just for a matter of record, this is a public hearing. Can you explain what pictures you're referring to? Do you mean in the application that was in your packet?
In the application, the packet, there are photos of some pipes, and it's part of their plan.
Okay, well, you're holding up pictures from a member of the public. Are you talking about those pictures, or are you talking about in the applicant?
In the
application?
Yes, in the application, there's photos of
Are you
pipes.
talking about these pictures?
Yes, yes. So there are photos of pipes. In line with the discussion, are the plans to keep them as they are intact and ensure that they're protected against erosion or damage?
So those pipes, as part of this application, would not be relocated. So they're going to definitely have to work around that pipe. I don't believe I have those pictures with me that you're referring to, but I've seen them obviously in the review of the
They're like in the
application.
back, the last page.
So, yes, those pictures, I definitely have reviewed them. So, as part of the condition that I've added, that would be the connection of the proposed bulkhead to the existing bridge, which will have to take into account the BRSA force main, which is that blue pipe that you see going under the ground. So yes, that will be part of our review.
As well as the reinforcement under the bridge.
How that's going to connect to the bridge, whether that be a return or if the elevations work that they can tie.
So their plans identify, or do they not identify?
Currently, they do not.
So that will be part of their plan.
Yes.
As mission. Okay.
Any further dialogue? It's a pleasure of the governing body. Is there a motion to approve resolution number 2022-199?
Motion.
Can you list all of the conditions?
All right here.
I have it. They try to read them.
I could incorporate Trevor's conditions set forth in the record tonight and his letter of August 31st, 2022, related to this hearing on the motion hearing.
Okay, so that's what your motion is inclusive of, Mr. Pepperoni?
What he said.
Yes, great. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott.
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson.
Yes.
Councilmember McNamara.
Yes.
Councilmember Aranio.
Yes.
And Councilmember Pepperoni.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The resolution passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have two Monmouth County open space programs, improvement of Cedar Street Park. Okay, is this something that we've already submitted for a different application and just updated what Who worked on this with you for suggestions for this application?
Yes, Mayor, if I may. This is I'll call it a duplicate application. It was previously submitted to the Monmouth County Open Space Grant Program. It was partially funded, resubmitted and requested. There's a $250,000 maximum available under this program, and we were awarded a $140,000 partial grant for this. Recommendation was to resubmit for additional funding to take us, we're requesting an additional $100,000. We initially did request the full $250 funding as part of our first application. So this is essentially the same application for improvements to Cedar Street Park. So this application was submitted initially a year ago and was partially funded. So the application has already been prepared. We've already begun the initial environmental reviews. So this application has been updated to reflect current cost estimates, but is essentially the same scope of work with a few minor details. If Trevor, you'd like to walk through them or just explain the difference between the prior application and this.
Sure, as Mr. Delaney said, our previous estimate was $480,000. Did update the estimate based on current construction costs, and that increased the cost estimate to $534,000. So we're looking at about a $54,000 increase in construction cost estimate. I believe the original estimate was actually prepared back in 2022, because I believe this was submitted back in 2022 and then resubmitted in 2021.
The initial estimate was 2020.
2020, right, 2020.
Is there a motion to open to the public?
Motion.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any members of the public have any commentary on this application, public hearing? Seeing no hands, can I have a motion to close the public? Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any commentary on the dialogue from the governing body? Council President McNamara?
I have a couple of questions. You mentioned that the previously submitted was the 140, which I recall. Also back in March, there was another grant for 60,000 that we had gotten for this project. So we already had 200. So this is for an additional 100. And this, the open space grants, we need to match.
These are matches, that's correct.
So we're going to be responsible for matching 240.
That's correct. And the current estimate is the $534,000. So depending on how successful we are in this application round, will determine the full amount of funding that the borough will need to add to this project to complete.
Okay, so between the 60 and then all of this would be 540, which is approximately what we're estimating here.
That's correct.
So at some point, once we hear back on this, we're going to be looking to go out for bond for 240.
For the difference, again, depending on what the, how successful we are in this current round.
Okay.
And I will mention that one of the requirements under this grant program is for environmental, phase 1 environmental review. That has been completed and has been submitted to the county, which is why this project was the top priority, because we've already started the process, and we're really just looking for additional funding to supplement the borough's funding.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, the county is usually agreeable to phased projects. So we don't have to already have started it or done a phase to apply for this additional?
No, that was one of the initial questions that we had, is that many grant programs will not allow additional applications while there are open projects. But we reached out to the county, and we are able to submit an additional request in this round.
Okay, and we're not in jeopardy of this, losing this other 60,000 that we already got as a grant by delaying any of this, are we?
We are not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the government? No? Seeing that there are none, is there a motion to approve Resolution 2022-200 authorizing grant from County of Monmouth for the 2022 park improvement project?
Motion. Second.
Let's have a roll call.
Councilmember Pacheco?
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott?
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson?
Abstain.
Councilmember McNamara?
Yes.
Councilmember Aranio?
Yes.
And Councilmember Pepperoni?
Yes.
Next, we have public hearing adoption ordinances. Ordinance 2022-21, bond ordinance providing for various roadway improvements. Michelle, can you please read that by title?
This is an ordinance providing for the 2022 road improvement project by the Borough of Keyport, appropriating $1,700,000 therefore, including various grants in the aggregate amount of $521,900 expected to be received from the State of New Jersey Department of Transportation, and authorizing the issuance of $1,150,000 bonds or notes of the borough to finance part of the cost thereof.
Have a motion to open to the public?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any members of the public have any questions or comments on this public hearing? Ms. Mashpiro?
Danielle Mastro-Piero, 378 Atlantic Street. I was just wondering what specifically was included with this. Is this the Broad Street project or something else?
The Broad Street project is being funded by Monmouth County. They're doing the milling and paving, and they did some handicap upgrades. We did do some areas out of a previous approved bond of $500,000 a few years ago, but that bond was adjusted just to do the smaller portions of the borough properties on Broad Street. This is in contingent with the NJDOT applications and grants that we apply every year, according to a ranking of the conditions of the roadways is how things used to be submitted, but in the last 2 years, that's pivoted, and it's water and sewer improvements should be dictating when the roads get repaired. So this was a work in progress for the last 2 years. Jay, do you want to go through the roadways, please?
Certainly. This is what is described as, first of all, it was referenced that included in this bond ordinance includes the authorization for $521,900 that are available from 2 NJDOT grants. Those are New Jersey Department of Transportation grants for municipal aid. Specifically, the borough's in receipt of a $270,000 grant to partially fund the improvements planned for a portion of Fulton Street as well as 7th and 8th. A second separate DOT grant has been received in the amount of $251,900, and that's related to the planned improvements to East 3rd Street and Butler. Additionally, this bond ordinance also incorporates various roads for not total reconstruction, but resurfacing, milling and paving. And those roads, we've identified a number of portions of Jackson Division Street, Kearney Street, West 2nd Street, Monroe Street, I'm sorry, that may be Avenue, Chandler, as well as a portion of Willow. So this is I would call it a omnibus type of appropriation that incorporates not only our DOT projects, which are more involved, and will include some utility improvements that are water and sewer improvements and drainage that are included as part of these projects, and then the milling and paving of sections of streets throughout the municipality.
Excellent, thank you so much.
Jay, just for clarification on the last street, you said it's Willow?
Yes.
Sure.
Pretty sure. That's that portion of Willows that from St. Peter to
That's the TV inspection area.
Right. So that is Willow, off of St. Peter.
Got it. Okay.
Partially vacated, we have storm sewer that runs through there.
That's why I was
needs to be-
just wanted to clarify. Thank you. sorry, I saw hands going up in both directions, sorry about that, Mr. Ross.
Just a quick question, John Marlett, 34 Grove Street. Regarding these streets, are they on target to be like televised, the water and sewer lines before we mill and pave?
They are. Most of the, what I'll call the main reconstructions, the Fulton 7th, 8th, East 3rd, some of that televising work has already been completed. The various roads, they were identified because they either have no utilities on them or because this is just a milling and paving, it's not as expensive an investment. Most of these are dead ends or short stretches.
The one I was concerned about the most is East 3rd. A couple of residents down there the day that the truck was there to televise, and they had sewage blow up through their tubs and toilets while it was being televised. I guess they pumped air to check for leaks. And there is some, when you come off of Fulton Street onto East 3rd, on the right-hand side, there's some deep divots. Down towards the end on the left-hand side, there's some shallow, ponding. There could be some pipe problems.
Yeah, and actually, for the record, East 3rd was intended to be reconstructed as part of a prior road project, but it had been deferred because at that time there were a number of utility issues that had been observed, both on the sanitary sewer side as well as the stormwater side. And there has been work that was done in preparation for this reconstruction, specifically I'll defer to the engineer, the storm drainage system at the intersection of Fulton and East 3rd has been addressed.
I've seen that.
Right, and the televising that was recently completed is part of this process as well.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kaplan?
That's Poplar 77 Beer Street. The streets on the Broadway side of town that you mentioned, those are getting paved? Chandler, you did mention Chandler, right?
Yeah, dead end of Chandler. There are a couple of short stretches of roadway that are in need of immediate attention.
Not the entirety of Chandler?
Right.
Just a dead end going to the marsh, to the Pato?
And then West Second is the other one?
That's correct. I think those are the only two at that end of town.
And then which dead end on Jackson? We're not talking about the one by the school, right?
We are speaking about the one by the school.
That's owned by the school?
And there's a portion of that is owned by the borough. The portion between Broad and Division, excuse me, thank you. And
So is it going to go up to Division, or has there been any coordination with the school to?
There has not as of yet because we haven't the funding in place.
Right. Okay.
It's all good until that happens.
Okay. What about Second Street?
To piggyback off that, the school has been asking us when we were going to, so they know that we were trying to get things in the works to take care of that part. We're by the school on Jack.
Right, but we're not, or it's okay with me if the borough determines that they would do that little piece that's school property, but we're not going to do that, right? Because they may want to use that to expand the basketball courts or something?
And again, those discussions have not taken
Gotcha.
place.
Okay. We're talking about the same thing, right, Dan? Okay. What about Second Street? Is that in the purview?
Second is currently, earlier this year, the borough submitted 2 DOT municipal aid applications, one for Second Street and one for Atlantic. So those applications are pending.
And then, do you know if Atlantic Street, not Atlantic, you said Atlantic, Second Street has infrastructure beneath it that's going to need to be dealt with as well?
We anticipate that. There's only been preliminary review of Second. In fact, Second, because of its length and the anticipated level of reconstruction necessary, was actually identified, I believe, Trevor, as a phase 1, phase 2.
That's correct. We submitted phase 1, which was from Stone Road to Waverly.
Okay. Second is, and I see why you're doing it, you're waiting because of the infrastructure, but Second, next to Church, is probably one of the worst roads in the town at this point, right? So it would be, hopefully we'll get that done soon. But thank you.
Any other members of the public? Mr. Lane?
on Broad Street today, I'm talking to one of the store owners, and there's a great big, huge metal plate down on Broad Street. We had a cave-in on the stormwater pipe.
There was a sinkhole, yes, but that's not relevant to this public hearing right now.
Well, what I'm wondering is there any problem with paving Broad Street? What's the condition of the stormwater pipe? Is that gonna be fixed?
We can give an update during the day's updates on that. It's a legitimate question and concern. Any other members of the public? Seeing no hands, can I have a motion to close to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any conversation amongst the dais?
Just for the record, because I live on East Third Street, I'm allowed to vote for this because based on council last meeting, that this is a general capital project. And anyone who lives in these streets can vote for it.
I would agree with that analysis, yes.
Yes.
If there's no further dialogue, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 2022-21?
Motion. Second.
And please have a roll call.
Councilmember Pacheco?
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott?
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson?
Yes.
Councilmember McNamara?
Yes.
Councilmember Aranio?
Yes.
And Councilmember Pepperoni?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a motion authorizing the clerk to publish the ordinance as adopted?
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any no or abstain? Next, we have introduction of ordinance number 1, ordinance establishing a mid-block crosswalk on Broad Street between 3rd Street and East and West Front Streets. Before we read that by title, I just have a couple questions about this. It's not a public hearing, this is just an introduction. Who met about this proposal?
Mayor, I can answer that. As you are aware, it was a public hearing at our most recent meeting on August 16th, and there was a public hearing related to a similar ordinance that included, in addition to the creation of the mid-block crosswalk, it also eliminated parking in the section on both sides, in the section of Broad Street from West Front to 3rd. At that time, the ordinance, based on substantial public questions, was not adopted. Subsequent to that, Councilmember McDermott had requested that the ordinance be redrafted for the council's consideration that eliminated the parking, the elimination of the parking, and simply addressed the mid-block crosswalk as initially proposed.
So at the last council meeting, there was the dialogue that there would be a meeting called with people that attended, that had expressed concerns. Did that meeting take place?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did any members of the committee speak with the public about Mr. Delaney?
Yes, when constituents reach out to me, I will respond to them, Mayor. I was told by one person, William Gendron, and I left him a message, and I spoke to Melissa O'Connell on the day of the table. The turnout was quite quick. We will get a committee formed, and we will have a discussion about it.
So this introduction is by recommendation of who, I guess is what I'm asking.
So given that there were discussions and concerns about parking, using parking on one side of the street on Broad, and given the fact that we kind of have to make a decision quickly regarding what we're going to do with that roadway, and there's a controversy between one-way, two-way, eliminating parking, the only thing that seemed to be in concurrence and agreement was a pedestrian crosswalk on there, as well as where the library is, the corner of 3rd.
Concurrence and agreement with who?
It seemed the public, that's what they wanted. I agree that there should be additional review of this, but I don't think time is at our hands.
I guess that's what I'm asking. So it's concurrence of the public, but the public weren't asked.
We had a whole hearing about it, Mayor. That was the one thing that came out of the hearing.
And they were told that they would have a meeting and there would be further dialogue. So I just want to point out that I think there might be other recommendations, but there's an introduction, so I'll defer to the governing body on this one. Michelle, do you want to read that title?
This is an ordinance of the Borough of Keyport, County of Monmouth, New Jersey, amending Chapter 7 Traffic and Chapter 7A Traffic Schedules of the revised general ordinance of the Borough of Keyport.
Is there a motion to introduce or dialogue amongst the governing body?
Motion.
Second.
Is there a roll call? Can I have a roll call? Is there a roll call?
Councilmember Pacheco.
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott. Councilmember Davidson.
No.
Councilmember McNamara.
No.
Councilmember Aronio.
No.
And Councilmember Pepperoni.
No.
The motion wasn't passed to introduce.
Next on the agenda, we have communications by consent for approval. We have items 1 through 10, 1 through 9 for approval, and number 10 is receive and file. Regarding number 4, I would just ask if that was consideration of the governing body, that the request, if it was approved, that notice also go to the committee that the signs cannot be put in the public right of way or near or adjacent to any of the sprinkler heads in the parks. There was questions tonight about number 7, so I'm not sure if there's anyone wants to talk about that. And then number 9, if there was the pleasure of the governing body to table that one since you did not receive the legal review on that. Those are my comments on the items. Does anyone have any other further commentary on the communications? Councilmember Davidson?
Thank you, Mayor. On communication number 6, just a little clarification on which alley going down to the waterfront. We have, I guess, 1 or 2 of them, so I just want to know, is it both?
Hold on 1 second. Sorry, let me just make sure I'm reading the right one.
Yeah, it is my understanding, although you raised the point about the second alleyway, that this is the alley between the Broad Street parking lot and West Front Street.
So next to Lenora's is my understanding, and the reason is that the tent is going to be set up in the Broad Street Municipal Parking Lot, Main Street, Broad Street, behind McDonald's and the distillery. So that would flow from that alleyway out to the businesses on West Front Street.
Okay, so it's not the one going to the waterfront?
No.
Okay, no problem, thank you. And then on number 7, I do have concerns about the car show for multiple reasons, but did anybody check the time schedule for that? From what I understand, these cars are very low riding. Any car down there in the is not good, but they're very low riding cars.
So my understanding, Jay, you can confirm, is when this person came to put the application or request in, he was gauging first to see if there was an interest by the borough to allow another type of car show to take place in the municipality. So I don't know, have you met with him to get all those questions asked, like the other applicants would have to?
Yeah,
or is this just a gauging of interest so far?
The initial application was during the summer season, and at that time, the dates just didn't work with the other already scheduled events. At that time, it was suggested that if you wish to pursue it, to consider a different date. Since then, I have not had any direct conversation, but this is it's a different type of car show, I guess is the best way to put it. And so I guess at this point, it really is gauging whether there's this is something that the council wishes to consider and answer all those questions.
I think it's an odd time of year to have a car show in November, and I think the prep and anything we would have to do for DPW police would be, I think, almost futile, just because it's beginning of winter. Also, the types of cars, I think, depending on the traffic coming in and out, I believe a lot of them are very noisy. So it's something to consider, and also the KBBC hosts a very good car show every year, so I don't know if that's going to step on their toes, and I know they only do one once a year, but just to give consideration to the KBBC's car show. So, I'm not in favor of this.
Mayor, may I suggest that this matter be tabled for further discussion with the applicant based on the comments that were made at the initial public comment session of the meeting and the concerns that I've heard expressed thus far?
Well, I think first we should gauge the governing body, if they want to have this people, or are they not interested, and then you don't need to have further dialogue with them, you could just say that they're not interested. And you should also take into note that this is a Sunday that they're requesting, I believe. In addition to, there's other entities that have asked for a fireman's lot on Sundays, and we have advocated that that's an important vital lot within our municipality for our businesses, and the business owners have commented frequently about how they enjoy having the parking lot and parking available. So this is not a entity within the borough of Keyport that's requesting for this. So I guess, could we see first if there's a gauge to, we want to vote on this one separately?
Yes. Motion to pull number 7 from separate consideration.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And then number 9.
Do you want to table that one?
Table that.
Okay, so is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to table number 9.
We can't hear you, Lori.
I'm so sorry. Make a motion to table number 9. Communications, by consent, 9.
Is there a second? So, all in favor?
Aye.
Any no or abstain? Any other commentary on communication? Seeing that there is none, is there a motion to approve items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 for approval and just receive and file number 10?
Motion. Second.
If that motion can also include the no public right of way or near sprinkler or adjacent sprinkler heads on public property for number 4.
Did we already look at the list of where they specified? I'm not 100% sure if any of these are.
Well, some of them are in Waterfront Park and there's sprinklers throughout Waterfront Park, so.
Okay, motion to approve 1, 2, 3, 4 with communication that the signs can't be put in sprinkler areas or in public right of way. 5, 6, and 8.
And 10. And 10. And 10.
Oh, there's another page, sorry. And 10.
Second.
Have a roll call, please, Michelle.
Councilmember Pacheco?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson?
Yes.
Councilmember McNamara?
Yes.
Councilmember Aronio?
Yes.
And Councilmember Pepperoni?
Yes.
Separate consideration was item number 7. I guess, do we want to gauge the governing body if this is something you wish, Jay, to continue further dialogue with this applicant?
I'd like to hear from them if possible, what they had planned and everything. Maybe they want to change the time of year or something. I'd at least like to give them, hear about it.
I, on the other hand, no, because KVBC does an amazing car show, and that's a real entity that I think, I would say no.
I would also say no, for the same reason, the KVBC does do a great job at the car show. Also, they didn't indicate that they would contribute to the police or DPW. That's going to be needed for this. I know there's about 200 or 300 attendees that we're going to give them, so I would say no.
200 or 300. But we don't have no information before you even shut them down. How do we know they're not going to donate to the town? How do we know there's not going to be a fee? We know nothing. We're just going to shut it down. If we're trying to bring people into town, isn't that a good way? Bring people from all over the state into town? These aren't local people. Up to you guys.
Anyone else have any dialogue? Anyone else? I don't think anyone heard you, Councilman Davidson.
Sorry, I'm gonna say no. I think it does bring in a lot of people, but I think the types of car,
I mean, I've been to a million of these, I mean, you've seen whatever you guys want to do. But if we're trying to bring people into town, new faces, new foot traffic, you gotta do some things outside of the normal.
So I think we're split a little bit right now, so I guess, Jay, do you want to get some more information and we send it back to them at the next meeting?
Certainly.
So can I have a motion to table 7 and 9 to the next
Motion
meeting?
to table number 7 and number 9.
Oh,
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And no abstain. Approval of minutes from August 16th, 2022 regular council meeting.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Abstain.
Any no? Oh.
I have to abstain also.
Everyone else is in favor?
Yes.
Okay, next we have the rent pilot conversation. Council President McNamara gave the update at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anything else to add to that at this point, or?
I have nothing to add at this point.
Next we have the commentary for the parking advisory committee final report, and Councilman, we're prepared for that.
I think once we determine Broad Street, there's going to be some changes that also need to be made here on the parking committee. So I think we might have to go back to that and decide what we're doing.
So is there no further dialogue on that tonight? Okay. Days updates, Chief Torres, you have anything? Go ahead, Councilmember Turner.
Gazebo construction, where are we with that? Because I guess there's a little confusion as to whether that was being brought back to council or.
It was on the last meeting.
I know, but I guess my question is, was there communication with KBDC, because there was mention about additional?
Yes.
Okay.
They received the engineer's review.
I'm just saying, it's a little clarification that needs to be done with that, that's all.
Clarification from who?
I think based on what we voted, it was gonna go back to the governing body and we're gonna make a decision. Now, I understand last meeting, there were 2 members not here, so I just wanted to know if we were gonna take, if action was being taken, it was communicated that they were gonna proceed with it to KBDC, that's all.
It was listed at the last council meeting, and there was no objection under unfinished business, so the engineer review was provided to KBDC.
Right, my only question was, I know there was issues with the additional fee, I think there was an additional stipulation of the engineering package.
That's for them, so now KBDC has to see whether they're in agreement with doing that.
Okay.
Mayor, can I just chime in on that? Just because I wasn't here, was there an actual vote to allow them to put the gazebo? Where is that process?
It was the governing body to move it forward pending the engineer's review.
That was at the last, okay.
No, that was like 2 or 3 meetings ago that everyone approved. I believe there was 1 no for this to move forward for engineer review.
I thought after that, excuse me for interrupting, but I thought after that it was pending the engineer's review, then to be brought back for a vote.
Which it was listed, I don't know that it had to go for a vote, and there's no discussion about pending the engineer review at the last meeting.
Yes, my interpretation was, and my perception was that there was general consensus to approve it, but at that time there were questions about the process in terms of what would be necessary to actually construct it. The borough engineer provided information as to what would specifically be needed by KBDC to move forward.
And if you do it as you're well aware of the email thread today, I made sure that that was all communicated to them, so that's on their agenda if they wish for it to be for next meeting for the KBDC board to which we received a response that they're not moving forward with that at this point in time. So at 5 o'clock today, I asked Michelle to list that on the next meeting agenda.
So there doesn't need to be any further discussion about having an agreement in place between the borough and the PUC about maintenance of it or anything of that sort.
Again, my understanding is that, pardon the expression, but the ball is in KBBC's court to decide whether they wish to move forward, because the engineer has recommended that there is more detail that would be needed in terms of how it would be constructed and, I guess, the footings necessary to be in that location.
Okay,
Michelle, do you have anything?
Yes, Mayor, just an announcement that hydrant flushing for the fall season and maintenance of the water distribution system that will include the flushing of hydrants and mains will begin on Thursday, September 8th, and that will continue for 3 weeks. And that will happen Monday through Friday between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. As in the past, there will be selected locations that may have flushing done overnight between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. And that would be Monday through Thursday nights only. But in general, it's daylight hours from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And that will be posted this evening on the website and Facebook.
Excuse me, Matt.
Additionally, Mayor, I would ask, just by way of introduction, about 2 weeks ago, during a torrential, short-duration, high-intensity rainstorm that resulted in a few days later a sinkhole developing on Broad Street in the sidewalk area behind some of the storm inlets. That had necessitated a review by the county. Some immediate repairs were undertaken, and it also unearthed some issues that we have with a sewer line in that area. I'll ask the borough engineer to provide an update on where we are with that, but we do expect to be doing some emergency sewer main replacement in that area before the county moves ahead with their paving.
And that also uncovered, certain employees from throughout the state, I guess mostly, and leave it at that. I heard me loud and clear when I had to jump up and down. I think the business owner can attest to that. When we weren't being heard once again about the conditions in that entire area, as well as throughout the municipality, and advocated for them to come out with a camera system to look into that further. So I believe that has now also been concluded.
That is mostly concluded, and again, I'll refer to the engineer to provide a specific update. That we are looking at replacing a section of sanitary sewer main in that area, working with the county on the storm drain issues. Broad Street is a county road, and it's also part of that is specifically related to at least one service lateral from the main to a commercial establishment that we'll be addressing.
Trevor, do you want to give those updates?
Sure, thanks, Mayor. As Mr. Delaney said, the county was out, I believe that was last Monday or Tuesday, I forget what day, but Monday, thank you. So the county was out on Monday repairing the storm sewer where the sinkhole had formed on the concrete pavers behind the road. We did ask that the county then take a look at the storm pipe. They did some TV inspection work on the storm pipe. They do have to come back and complete one section of that, which is actually under the sidewalk, not under the roadway. So they will be returning to do that. We also unearthed a sanitary sewer and the lateral storm sewer pipe had a hole in it, so we're addressing that sanitary sewer lateral along with some main work. So we called in an emergency contractor, B&W, to do some test pits, which they started on Thursday. They worked into Friday. They're supposed to be back out there today, but the county did not allow them to work because of the rain. So they should be back out there tomorrow to complete the test pit work and start the repair work. We're anticipating that's probably going to be between tomorrow, Thursday, and possibly into Friday. So hoping by the end of the week that the emergency repair work will be complete on Broad Street. Just another update on Broad, the county, as Mary indicated earlier, they did commence the concrete work. They're anticipating doing the milling and paving the week of September 19th. All milling and paving will be done at nighttime between the hours of approximately 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. They are hoping to be done in 2 or 3 nights. So their intention is to mill and pave all in one night. So by 6 o'clock the next morning, whatever they've milled should be paved, so that'll be rideable again in the morning. So they have Stavola Contracting that is doing the work. They move pretty quickly, so hopefully within 2 or 3 nights that will be complete, and then the striping will get the center line striping done, and they'll come back and do the stop bars and the crosswalk shortly thereafter. So that's all anticipated to be done the week of September 19th. Some additional news of the county. I'm not sure when it was done, but I did notice that the double yellow striping was done on First Street. That was, I noticed that last week. Moving on to the Broadway Bridge, we received a detour plan just today, actually, to change that project from 3 phases to 2 phases. If you remember, initially it was supposed to be 3 phases, and they're going to keep the road open in both directions for all 3 phases. Now they're looking at doing the project in 2 phases, which for the first phase, they'll be shutting 1 lane of traffic down with the detour. They'll be detouring the eastbound traffic. That's the plan that we received today that they're looking for comments on, so we'll get that back to them shortly. Their initial schedule for that was to have the detour in place for 3 to 4 months, and then come back and do the second phase in another 3 to 4 months. So we're talking about, it was supposed to be a 8 to 12 month project. Now we're looking at a 6 to 8 month project, but it's going to require detouring of the road. So there'll be more information coming on that as we get the revised plans, the revised schedule for them, but right now we just received the detour plan and some initial information from them. Walnut Street, the contractor was supposed to be out there today to continue the road work. I got an email from them tonight saying that they are going to postpone tomorrow now because of the rain, so they should be back on Thursday to complete the paving work in front of their property. That will be ongoing for, I'm sure, several days, I'm sure into next week, but they should be back out there Thursday morning to start up working again. The last item I have is for 3rd Street. We did get the TV inspection done. This is the dead end of East 3rd Street. We had the TV inspection of the storm sewer and sanitary complete about 2 weeks ago. I just received the reports last week, so we'll be taking a look at those and incorporating any of those improvements with the roadway improvement project, which was on tonight for the bond ordinance. Unless there's any other questions, that's all I have for now.
Any members have questions of the thing? I have a motion to open to the public for 5 minutes of action per person.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Kelsey?
Andrew Kelsey, 29 St. Peter's Place. This car show, are they planning on having concessions, like food and drink, or what's the story on that? Nobody knows? I mean, they can't just show up and sell food and drink without permission, that's right. All right, so they were talking about 300 cars?
2 to 300 people.
2 to 300 people? Okay.
They said people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. From 9 to 5 that are going to need to eat and drink. I mean, they sound like 200 to 300 customers for all the businesses in town. I mean, Councilman Pepperoni hit the nail on the head. I don't know why you guys would want to turn this down. I mean, you don't have to like the cars. You don't have to go there. That's not your thing. I mean, it's not for everybody. It's going to bring all these people in from outside of town.
I don't know if I'm reading it right wrong, what anybody else thought. I see a number of people attending 25 to 30.
I think that's the, like,
Is that the number?
they participants.
Oh.
I mean, that's how I took it.
That's the number of cars, but there's some, in an email, he puts it.
Oh.
And I don't know what about this car show would do any harm to the KBBC. I don't know why they get
first crack and such preferential treatment on certain events in town. I don't know what that's about. I mean, I don't know why they get protected like that. You think we'd want like a free and open market, people come here and compete, and it's not like the car show's gonna hurt their car show, they're not even close to it. I don't know if they still do it, but Real Borough had a car show every single week. Every week, it was not a problem. Everybody showed up. It's a great time. Sounds like a good thing. I mean, I see no reason why you wouldn't want this. I mean, it seems like a self-defeating decision to me. All these people that we probably don't get here a lot, showing up in town, seeing what it's about. What if they want to come here every year? What if they want to have car shows every month? Sounds great. I don't get it. And we don't have to pay for it. If they need to contribute to security and DPW, then have them contribute. But otherwise, I don't get it. That's all I have.
Hi, it's Daniel Fox, 40 Church Street. Trevor, when we paved Church Street, we asked the church agent, the last storm, the water was up over my sidewalk. In 43 years, we never had water on my property. Now we paved that parking lot, the water comes rushing down second, out of the parking lot, over the 8-inch sidewalks that my 2-foot sidewalk I used to have. So in a year, my sidewalk is going to collapse, my retaining wall is going to collapse, and then next my foundation. It was up my neighbor's driveway on both sides. It was up over past the fire hydrant, all the way into the parking lot. The entire street had to put water on. Church Street never flooded there before. But now you've taken away all the areas where it could like blacktopping everything, not putting in any draining. So I hope you haven't released the performance bond. Also, at the end of Church Street, where we did this crazy circle around the firehouse, you're also flooding the firehouse there, all the way up to the grass. So,
Did you mark that?
I mean, that's, now people that are in flood zones have to buy flood insurance because the town didn't properly engineer a street project. And so if the water comes in my house, I don't have flood insurance. I'm out. I used to have a, 3-foot curb. The engineer that was working the project said they were just going straight down the line. So I have less than a foot curb in front of my house now. It intersects with 2nd Street and now a paved parking lot. And water over my side. In my neighbor's driveway. And
You mentioned a 3-foot curb, what?
The curb, my curb used to be this high. I never had water over it. Now my curb is this high, water comes over it. Then I complained about the neighbor getting an illegal driveway report. An illegal driveway redone by the town's taxpayers' dollars. Now that they park in there, they have ripped my retaining wall down with their truck. That constantly sits between my property,
Can you just tell
our
me what,
driveway, and the street.
can you tell me what
No
address
tickets.
you were referring to?
35 Church Street.
35 Church Street. Jay,
I
were you
complained.
doing a driveway there?
It was an existing concrete driveway that was
They
replaced.
didn't report, never had a permit, which I explained to you and the administrator.
Yeah,
Spent taxpayers' dollars.
My recollection is that I don't know in terms of permit approval, but my recollection was it was determined that that existing driveway was there for 20+ years.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It was there
This is,
toward the previous owner,
Mr.
poured it,
We're not
sold the
going back and
property.
forth. I just wanted to clarify what the address was of the driveway you were talking about.
And now if you go by a chunk of this big of my retaining wall is laying on the sidewalk. And there's no enforcement of it being blocked, the sidewalk being blocked by the vehicles.
How that looked into. In regards to the recent flood last Monday, obviously there were roads that unfortunately flooded in town, but there were roads that we have never seen flood in town. One of them was American Legion Drive, and I'm not talking back by the Fireman's Park, I'm talking right in front of Burlew's, all the way down to Gourmet Dining, and in front of another area in front of Broad Street. So I know that was a high-intensity storm. I'm not saying that that's good that it happened at all, but it was not your average rainfall. Trevor, you were going to look up the information on that rainfall. Did you have a chance to do that?
Yeah, we had, in that rain event, I think it was the intensity was 4 to 5 inches per hour, which is a significant rain event. Some of the other flooding events that we've seen in the past, it was 1.5 to 2 inches per hour frequency. This is almost double that. So it was definitely a very short storm, but the amount of rain that came down in that 20 minutes or half hour was significant.
Yeah, again, it should still be looked at,
Yeah,
I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, but that wasn't our normal scope.
Has 2 storm drains at Third and Church. That's it. And we asked the town engineers to add, they said they stood out there in the rain and it was fine. And once they poured the mold for the curb, said there's going to be a problem. The curb is too low. No, the curb is fine, the curb's fine. The water was up into the parking lot, the water was up into all the neighbors' driveways, up over my sidewalk. My family's owned the house for 43 years. Water's never come over the sidewalk, any type of storm. And now we get a rainstorm and the water's up. So, like I said, within a year, my retaining wall will be gone, my sidewalk will be gone.
Well, that's what we all go and experience rainfall like we did that one, but it should be looked into, so we will look into it.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Patapos?
Dennis Patopoulos, 77 Beer Street. Trevor, the Broadway project, is that going to be affected by the sinkhole that occurred?
Broadway project?
World Street project?
Where
I had Broadway in my mind.
they are trying to make sure that because it's an emergency appropriation, this doesn't have to go out to your typical process, so we're hoping that it will be able to be done and complete prior to the paving. The county is obviously aware of the entire situation because they're out there doing their part as well.
Is it costing the borough any money?
Replace a large section of a sewer line, yes.
How much?
I don't think we have the bidding yet, do we?
I don't have the final number yet. It's going to be partially determined on what they find tomorrow with the last test pit, so it's a work in progress.
Okay. How much was the repair, the water line repair on Beer Street? $250,000?
Jay, what was the final number on that? Because there was other stuff that was done with that.
The number of 347 sticks in my head.
347?
Yeah, now the combination of the immediate water main repair and then the subsequent sanitary improvements that were necessary, and then the road restoration.
Typically, where do these funds come from when it's an emergency appropriation like that?
Well, they come from the boroughs. Essentially, they are initially done by emergency appropriation that is then funded in the next year's budget.
In the next year's budget, so it's going to be, we're going to see that number in next year's budget.
Typically, in the case of Beer Street, because of the level of cost, we actually subsequently did a bond ordinance to cover that, so that the cost will be spread out and not impact next year's budget in full.
So it was I think it was a 10-year bond ordinance. It wasn't a lot, right?
Well, in general, all bond ordinances require that the temporary notes that are used have to be paid off at the conclusion of 10 years, or they can be refinanced for an extended period. But the plan is that this bond would be paid off in 10 years.
Okay. Mayor, with respect, when is the council going to sit back up on the dais?
When everyone can fit up there. Everyone wants to be spaced out, so if we go back to where we were before, and we would be elbow to elbow, and since, although we want it to be over, with recent cases, the pandemic is not over, unfortunately. It's something over by executive order, but we still have several cases of COVID happening right here in Keyport. So, why are people still spaced out? I don't foresee that happening right now.
The issue that I have, and it's just a personal issue, there are council members, I think there's only two council members that have sat up on the dais. There are council members that haven't sat up on the dais. It's a member Kathleen McNamara hasn't been on the dais, and neither is council member Davidson. And when you say dais reports, the dais is the place for the council members. So I from a personal, we've been sitting and it's definitely your purview, and it's also the purview of the council, their desire as well. But I would like to see at some point, at least a plan, or there was mention of redoing the dais in here at some point, so
all supposed to be done by last July, just like the camera up on that. Just like the carpet being cleaned, the chairs being.
Well, the plan never came, the plan was never voted on by council, and that's definitely a council decision, and I don't remember, it wasn't brought to the council when I was on council, so bring it together, let's
Yeah, it was on
get
the
the elected
planning
officials.
committee last year, there was a committee for that.
There was, okay, but it never came to council. And I never saw it at council, and I don't know if they have either. It's okay, it's fine, I'm just saying, the council, you know, they don't get paid for the job they do. Well, they do, but how much is that, right? And including you, and with respect, all of you, all of the elected officials that are elected, should go up on the dais. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Long?
George Long, 54 Second Street. Hopefully I'll be able to get that 5 minutes back out of my life. Question. Did we do closeout on Church Street yet?
No, we have not.
No?
No.
All right. One thing you might want to consider when you come out of that new parking lot, there's no one-way sign there.
Yeah, that's actually something we requested. I thought that had been installed already, but thank you for that. I will follow up.
No, it hasn't yet. And there was
That
probably,
You're talking about onto Second, right?
pardon me?
You're talking about when you come out onto Second?
Yes, ma'am.
Where the one was taken down, and what you had pointed out to me.
Again, if you want to stroll it on memory lane, that's fine.
No, I'm just
I'm
saying. I
bringing
know
up a
it's-
point that we
Yeah,
don't have a
it's
one-way sign
great.
there.
It's a great
You
point.
get somebody from Perth Amboy that comes down, parks there, because they're in Drews, they come out and make a right-hand turn. They're gonna go, well, geez, the mayor said the sign was correct.
No, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same sign, that's all. But I agree with you.
What other one-way sign would there be?
Going into the parking lot, but go ahead, Mr. Long.
Going into the parking lot? There was never one.
Entrance, but go ahead.
Okay, you're right there. Jay, where are we at with the letter from the chiefs in regards to the curb cut?
I have not heard anything. That's a county permit that you requested, and I made the request to the fire company.
And you told me they said there's a letter.
They said that there would be a letter.
No, you told me there was a letter, and the chief was in a car accident, and I explained to you that there's 3 other chiefs. How hard would it be to get the letter? So once again, I'll ask you, how hard is it to get the letter?
Well, it's hard enough that it hasn't happened yet, but I'll do my best to follow up with the chief.
I'll look forward to it. Chief, how are you? If this car show comes to town, I guess you guys are gonna do it for free?
That hasn't been applied for, that's the whole point of the conversation tonight, is that there was a basic application without further pieces of communication.
Oh, thanks, Chief.
Anytime, Chief's meeting. Mr. Morrow?
Should I give the Met score?
Yeah, please.
John Morella, he's absent, but he told me to report to him after. 34 Broad Street, Keyport. Just to follow up on a few things that I've brought up before, many meetings. Mr. Delaney, Senator's report that we're going to do hydrant flushing. One of the things I think the borough has to implement is something that I've brought up in the past and recently, as recent as the last hydrant flushing. It's good to flush hydrants, and the municipality is responsible for flushing their hydrants that are owned by the borough of Keyport. However, there's several facilities in Keyport that have private hydrants on their property. And if you want to do it right, everybody should flush. The Air Marine, there's an ordinance they have to follow. It says once a year, an annual flushing, plus a $250 fee to the borough of Keyport has to be made and done. And the report has to be given to the borough. There's condominiums, there's complexes all over town that have been approved over the last 20 years. They have to do the same thing. And in order to get a real good hydrant flushing, every hydrant has to be flushed. Every functional hydrant has to be flushed. So I think we have the leverage to put the notices out to these facilities. It's time to flush your hydrants, give the borough the report that it's been done, and then we all know we're on the same page. Because that's not been done in a long, long time. Second was, Trevor, under your report, Broad Street. I think the county's got to come down a little further too. Down towards 34 and 36, there's two basins, stormwater basins, and the stank of sewage in both of them is atrocious. And it's getting worse than it was last week. So something's not right, and I would have them check. I mean, I know Mr. Delaney was there, and you across the street looking at that basin with Bob Kuchman, and I really think you should have that looked at.
Excuse me, Mr. Merton?
Yes.
If you would see me, just make sure I understand which basis you're speaking.
Right in front of the V&A and
By
across the
34,
street.
but in front of 34 Broad Street is what he's referencing. That's the one that you guys were at last week.
And one of the other things I've brought up, and I've said to the town and the town officials, it's very, very important, especially now more than ever, because a lot of the building projects that have been approved over the last 3 years by the planning board are starting to be built. And as they're starting to be built, they're being advertised. Real estate companies are putting them up, showing how beautiful they are. But they're also including that these condos and these new units qualify for tax abatements. This is something you really have to take into consideration. All right, a developer comes in, they get what they want, they sell the home, they sell the condo, and they get a tax abatement. That does not help the residents of the borough of Keyport that have been here forever. It helps the contractor sell his job, and no disrespect, one's advertising it on West Front Street on a banner in front of their building. And this is not what you want, all right? And I said it once and I'll say it again. I'm not opposed to tax abatements. Someone loses their house in a fire, I feel for them. They should have a tax abatement till they get on their feet. But someone that's coming in and selling a condo for $600,000 in Keyport, if that person could afford that $600,000 home, they should pay the taxes like everybody else is. No breaks. That's just my thought. And the last thing I had was, Mr. Patopoulos had brought up, like, you know, in an emergency, how do you fund that water repair on Beer Street? Well, one of the things is, and this has no blame on this council, but it goes back 17 years. So I applaud this council for raising the rates this year, because if it can generate surplus in the future with stuff like emergencies like that, that's where you go to pay for them. And the rates weren't raised. I was mayor the last time the rates were raised, 17 years ago. So think about that. Thank you for your time.
Danielle Mastro-Bureau, 378 Atlantic Street. Mr. Delaney, I just wanted to get an update on the cleaning of the porta potties and what that maintenance schedule is like.
Yes, the porta potties are rented, and they come with a, if memory serves me, a once-a-week service. We supplement that with actually a 2 times a week cleaning. And I believe it's Tuesdays and Fridays. They are cleaned by the vendor.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor Kennedy, I was looking for an update from you. I really appreciate all the efforts you have made in your terms that when you, in support of patriotic displays. I've seen the work that you do with veterans, the flag holding classes, and I really do appreciate that. I know a few months back you mentioned that the flags that were taken down, it was because they were tugging on the lights and they were frayed and in bad condition, and that we're going to be exploring other options. Those flags are really important to our community. Are there any other options being proposed, or is that something that's we're still working on?
The Visual Improvements Committee of KBBC has not presented anything to me at this point in time.
Thank you, Mayor.
Jack Straub, 235 Main Street. I believe that I asked at last meeting, we were missing some governing body members. Is there an update on where we are with the marijuana process? And is that something that the public can be updated on every meeting? Because it seems like nothing's happening.
I'll take this one.
Yes.
We actually are looking to schedule closed session at our next meeting.
Or a decision or conversation? Conversation.
Well, actually, I believe we're looking to make a decision on one of the locations.
Reason for asking is that you keep reading other municipalities seem to be getting up and running, there's revenue coming in, and if the public could just get an update every meeting until there is some permanent resolution. Thank you.
Mr. O'Connell?
Melissa O'Connell, 81 Broad Street. I have three things. One, I'm the vice president for the KDPC. As far as that car show, I don't see it being a conflict on our end. Our last event is October 29th, and we don't have another one until November 26th. So if you want to look into it, that's fine with us. It would be bringing business to the businesses. As far as the crosswalk, that's dead in the water again now. I'm a little confused. So I was here last meeting, it was squashed. So it's not being, a bunch of us businesses have met to discuss the crosswalk, so do I discuss that now, or that's gonna be?
You can discuss it now.
Okay. So the last time we saw anything with that paper last week, I did speak to Victoria,
It's okay.
Victoria, the day the sinkhole happened in front of my place, because that's when I found out Monmouth County was still paving. I kind of thought that whole thing got squashed too, because I hadn't heard anything. But if there is a chance, I mean, we all agree on the crosswalk, just with the placement of it again. I mean, I have a whole paper, I'm gonna go through it all now if we have some time, but I just want to know, can we really meet and discuss what the crosswalk's gonna be?
The plan was to meet so we could have a real conversation, but the week turnaround to get it on the agenda was a little tough for everybody.
Right, so we are gonna meet like privately, that is a committee before the next,
We will be setting up a meeting, yes.
before the paper.
I don't know if that'll happen at this point. We have an ordinance.
So when are they gonna stripe it? Right after they pay it, right? Isn't that supposed to be the next
After the
meeting?
19th.
The next meeting is when?
Right, so the striping, I'm assuming will start.
So if they're paying on the 19th, it's like 2 or 3 days, and then they would stripe it right after. Wouldn't we have to meet about the crosswalk?
The ordinance was not moved, so I don't really have an answer to that. We certainly have the capability to strike in the future. That was also part of the conversation during the public hearing, which is why I thought we would have a meeting to discuss how we would move forward on a larger scale. But I honestly don't have an answer for you.
Melissa, did you want to tell them what you informed me tonight? What your proposal was?
Yeah, so I have Maria Fast Copy, Maria Diner, I don't know anyone's last name. And then there's Rock Joe. So there's all of us, and Nate. He owns Fat Cat. So obviously, one of our sides, and Judge, he doesn't mention you, but I'll only get it. Judge, so on one of our sides, it's got to lose 3 spots. That's basically the thing of a crosswalk, if not both sides losing 3 spots. So next to Maria's quote-unquote driveway and between Nate's driveway is a block of cement, a walkway, a piece, that if you made that the walkway, then those 2 driveways are already in place. Across the street is where you guys were proposing And I know the firehouse, the fire company, because they're opening for Island Keyport, so I've been talking to them. They like the idea of not having a car in their, front of their space. But if you bring the crosswalk over there, it kind of, that's where it opens up. Plus, at least, like the look of it all, cosmetically, you'd be looking right at the crosswalk at Old Glory, which is a nice entrance back and forth. But we just wanted to kind of take it back.
Just shift it to in front of,
Yeah, because where you're doing it in front of me, like Old Glory, Shine, all, the Sharons, they all have parking. They all have parking behind them. They have parking lots, they have parking spaces. Maria, the Fat Cat has parking, but Maria, myself, Fast Copy, Broad Street Diner, First Walk, and none of us have any parking.
Right.
That is it, so if you could move the shift
Something
of
like
parking down.
Sidewalk, yes.
Right, because right now the way you had it proposed was right in front of First Walk, Fast Copy. So that was it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So that would have to be brought forward after a meeting and then for engineer review and police review and public safety review.
That would have to, the next meeting, or when you guys have the meeting with the committee?
Any other members of the board?
Yeah.
Michael Lane. Trevor, quick question. You said you did some scoping of stormwater pipe that caved in across from Capucci's on Broad. Were you able to verify that the size of the pipe aligns with your pipes?
Actually, the county did that TV inspection, so I don't have those reports. I can request that from the county.
Would you do that? And did they go towards First Street?
They did, yes. I'm not sure if they went all the way, but they did TV towards First Street.
That would really be an important input for the 25 East Front project. And so could you get that data?
I will request it, yes.
I'd really like to hear it. Second thing, Mayor, the flood damage prevention ordinance, which is in effect, it states very clearly that the application applies, the only thing that's grandfathered is projects where the structure construction started before the date that the flood damage prevention ordinance was adopted. So for example, Deputy Ventures, which has been in review and planning for multiple years, they haven't started any structure construction. So the new flood damage prevention ordinance applies to that site.
I just didn't have it in front of me tonight, so I wasn't sure. That's why I was asking Jay. He had it, if he had it with him, I didn't have it in front of me when I was referencing it before. That's why I was asking the question.
Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that. My favorite question, Trevor, when are we going to get the four-way stops and crosswalks on First Street?
So I actually did speak to the county about that probably about 3 weeks ago again. They said they had the report just about wrapped up. I will follow up with them again to request a copy of that.
I really appreciate hearing that. The utility poles maintenance on Borough Street, First Street, Prospect, etc. Mr. Quinn was at Beach Park, and he indicated he was working that problem. Do we have a status report?
When did you speak with him?
On the weekend when the county brought in their display,
The last update I had from him on that was approximately 10 days ago, but I'll request an update.
How do we get that update? Do you send me something?
I'll reach out to you, Mr. Lane.
Pardon?
I can reach out to you.
I appreciate that. On question I've asked before, the Mariner Village and project and the Browns Point Marina expansion. The original project assumed a long-term tax exemption, which has been withdrawn. Has the developer indicated he can proceed without a long-term tax exemption?
You've been waiting to hear back from them, is that correct, Mr. Laney?
Yes, there's actually a meeting scheduled with the developer, so we'll know more after that.
Future meeting?
Yes.
Because the borough withdrew its financial agreement. Anything new on the Henry Hudson Trail maintenance?
I don't have any update on that. I will, again, reach out to the county for that.
There were an item on the agenda for tonight, which was rent slash long-term tax exemption. Did I miss that discussion?
So in the beginning of the meeting, Council President McNamara provided an update regarding what she has learned.
So
That was the update.
So that was it, input. Thank you very much.
Any other members of the public? Seeing no hands, can I have a motion to close?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Orpel, we have a closed session.
One item on the closed session, discuss collective bargaining negotiations. As a topic that's allowed to be discussed in closed session, I don't anticipate any action to be taken in conclusion of that discussion. So, public can stick around for the adjournment, but there will be no action by the government.
Thank you, guys. Motion to go into close?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.